President sits next to the superintendent. Right. The vice president sits next to the principal. Right. And I honestly don't know how to look at those. Yeah. So I go to the next president. And secretary has a special thing. And it's very predictable. They usually get together and on a team. Yeah. And make decisions. And here it's like doing a chair. Well, but it's been happening. I think yeah. We've always done it, that's the way we do it, that's what we're gonna do it.
9:30 and.
Still oh, this is brutal. Well, last night
yeah. So at 6 o'clock, I was at Menards this morning getting a generator, put our refrigerator on.
Oh.
And we emptied out our upright deep freeze in the basement, took all the stuff out of it, moved it over to my father-in-law's, and it's in his garage, and we put everything back in it.
Right.
Big freeze around the house. Yeah, and it was. Luckily, nothing hit our house, but.
I was super prepared. I mean, like, last night, running around, like, battening down the hatch.
Yeah.
That my horses had only been out my place for 1 day. Making sure that they were okay. Anyway, they were fine. Gentlemen,
Yeah, I saw it.
I know. So, you know.
Yeah.
I'm like, those are tough ones because the dog is emotional, but I'm willing to try to work through it because I've done that often.
Yeah.
Hurt my shoulder. I thought this was until August.
Sorry, what? We have between July 27th and August 20-something.
Better.
That's your t-shirt. I do better with animals than people. We're ready to go.
We'll go ahead and get the work session started.
For the board work session this evening, I wanted to have members of the team share with you the things that we've done here at the end of the year for support or classified staff, our certified staff, and with our administrators. So, Tony and Charles, you want to go first to start us into that, and we'll talk to you about the things that we've been doing across the different groups for professional development and to help gear up for next year.
Oh, good deal. Good evening.
Good evening.
For those of you who don't know, this is Charles Stevens, who is the amazing administrative assistant and runs the Exceptional Learners classified staff members in our department. In a previous life, chuckle intended, when there were some moments to do classified academies, when we had lots of snow days. My first year here, we had 12 snow days. And all of the classified staff members lost those days to pay because there were some days that we didn't make back up. So we've gotten some traction on how to do classified academies. And, oh, we've got it up here. That line. You can just do the arrow piece. I think I'll do that. So what the classified academies are really opportunities for our classified staff who have lost some days of funding to be able to come in, get some instruction in areas that they might be interested in, and attend a conference day. These days are really conference days where they choose their different topics, they pick which sessions to attend, and we put together this beautiful flyer with Brenda. She did a great job. They could QR code in, and then we built a website for them to go look at what different sessions were available. We held them on May 31st and June 1st, the 2 days right after Memorial Day, so that folks could not have too much distance between the end of the school year and coming back for those two particular days. We did tend to run some strands. We ran a safety strand, a student safety strand, and then some HR and benefits strands for the folks who came.
So some of our classified participants that came were bus drivers and their aides, nurses, social workers, food service, secretaries, paraprofessionals, and then our occupational therapists. So as they would sign up, I would create their schedule for them and let them know where their classes were, and got them set with getting their schedules and claim forms and just that behind the scenes stuff.
So when we look at the folks that registered, we had about 200 folks. That includes, we had about 20 folks presenting, and some of those were classified folks doing some of the presenting. And we had a little over 170, so we hit that 200 mark, which made us very, very happy. That was a pretty good conference day.
Is that registered and attended, or?
That was registered and attended, yep. So we were not disappointed by our turnout. We were really nervous in the beginning because it would go from 8 to 10 to 14, and Charles and I were checking in like 4 or 5 times a day. Where are we today? Where are we today? Because we really wanted folks to have the opportunity. We had folks who were external presenters. This is a gentleman from Gibson, and Gibson is our insurance carrier. And we had these 9 participants who came in and trained our staff from outside agencies. So we had somebody from Ryan's Place talking about dealing with grief and loss. We had Apple, Wes Molyneux came from Apple, and he did 2 sessions. He did 2 different topics. Accessibility with Apple, how do we help our students with, and adults with special needs be able to access their iPad, and what's new with Apple. Oaklawn came and talked about dealing with your own stress, extremely popular session from the Oaklawn folks. Elkhart Fire Department was here, and they did fire safety, also highly sought after, because they got to use fire extinguishers and they got to use kind of virtual stuff, so they got to do some cool stuff that they wouldn't normally get to do. I mean, how many of us have shot off a fire extinguisher for practice? Not many people. So it was very interesting to see how those people kind of like some of that stuff. Smart systems through Pam, talked about sanitation, Gibson did situational awareness. Sources of Strength is an agency that works with grief, loss, and suicide prevention, really looks at death by suicide and how to do suicide prevention. The Elkhart Police Department did the latest on info on delinquent behavior, also a very popular session, because our staff members learned a lot about vaping, which is really kind of taking over lots of stuff that they didn't know before, how to look for, what kinds of things to look for, and just other kind of trends that are going on with teens right now. And then Canfield was here as a former employee, and she now works with, actually out of Beacon, doing CPR. So none of these folks charged us a personal fee. The only thing we had to pay for on that page was certifying our staff members for CPR. Everyone else donated their time, and here's kind of how big of a deal this is. On each day, there were 5 sessions, so our staff members could attend 10 sessions. Altogether, we had 27 sessions for them to choose from, so many of them really had to kind of narrow down which things they were going to do. And most of the folks that you see up here presented either 5 or all 10 sessions. So they repeated stuff so our staff members could go and go back and see some other things that were done. Many of you have seen John. John's been in front of the board before. He is our head nurse. He did 10 sessions of first aid. And you would think that first aid is something that's pretty easy, but he really made it practical. He was a guy that most of the folks came out of the sessions appreciating, how can I take care of a kid in a situation where I'm on the playground or in the lunchroom? Where should I be able to find things? Being able to talk about what the AED machines are, and then some simple stuff. So John Sessions, and I actually presented right next to him. You hear people chuckling and coming out. John's a really good presenter, but he volunteered to do 10 sessions. I was pretty excited about that. So we had quite a few sessions, about I think 16 or 18 sessions from folks that were our own professionals. So Mary did something on bully prevention. Todd did half-day sessions with folks on how to stay in the room when the conversation gets tough. How do we actually have conversations with each other? How do you have conversations with students when those are difficult conversations to have? Jamie Engen is one of our special education teachers at the Pride Academy up at Bristol, and she did CPI, Crisis Prevention and Intervention, which is the de-escalation and therapeutic hold training for some folks who needed that. John, as I mentioned, did first aid. Candy did that food safety piece for the food service folks. Maggie and Leslie did a new session for us we've never done before on management versus leadership, because we have a lot of folks in this classified categories who become managers and have never had any classes on how to manage or how to lead people. And that was a wildly successful session as well. When we looked at the surveys, that session came up, as well as our own Doris Fosterman behind you, or behind me, who did mandated reporting to Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services has a site you can go to, and it's a self-paced training that you can put on for other people. We walked through that in, 17 or 18 hours of preparation, and then she went right to work to be able to do that session for our staff members. I got to tell you, probably the thing that I heard the most about was the one Val did, the Public Employee Retirement Fund. Many of our staff members were excited to understand that they were going to get pensions. And when they heard about pensions and what that meant and how that worked, some of our younger folks who were coming in just to get started and get their career started, it was very interesting hearing them kind of with that light bulb clicking. You mean if I stay here? Yeah, that's exactly what we mean. It was a very exciting conversation. And then Sarita did students who were homeless and talking about the definitions of homeless definitions on the McKinney-Vento federal law are different than for adults, and you can qualify if you live at home in hotels or you double up. So she was able to explain that to staff members, because what we know is many of our students who are homeless, people that find out are the classified staff members who know or work with them. Our bus drivers are really good at knowing what's going on with our families because they see them at their home location, right? And when you tend to move a lot, or if somebody's waiting for you, that can bring up some questions. And then how do we get that family help and service when they may not know that they have help or service coming? I'm glad we did not do CPR today. That's all I'm saying. And then the last group here, again, our own experts, Ricky Byers, a person who does dyslexia and works in the INL department. She did reading one-to-one for many of our staff members who help folks learn how to read or doing one-to-one reading with children who have different issues with reading. Lindsay Cox is, as you know, one of our special education administrators, and Joe helps run the PACE program, did special education basics for our classified staff members who may know a little bit about special ed but wanted to know more. How do I support a kid if I'm helping clean in a class or clean in a cafeteria and a kid starts to have a hard time? What does that mean? What's an IEP? Just those basic things to help those folks know. Lindsay Brander, again, another one of our special education administrators, did trauma and the brain, how trauma affects the brain and thinking errors. And then she did the other day of TPI training, that therapeutic hold and restraint de-escalation training. Brian did some stuff on trust-based relationships. How do I work with a student who's having a difficult time that has trauma and know that I have to build a trust-based relationship for that kid to be able to change? Shelly Costa is a special education teacher at Northside, and Trish, you all know because she sold you all coffee. Understanding students with significant needs, really talking about our students with intense needs that have low cognitive functioning, have high behavioral and or physical needs. Many of our students are wheelchair bound. How do you work with students if you're in those classified areas and you're not trained to do that and you see something? What kinds of things do you do? Our own Jamie Snyder, what to do with canine dogs and what he does with canine dogs. There was a real interest level in understanding what do dogs do when they come on site. What kinds of things are they meant to do? How are they trained? And then I did, one day I did verbal de-escalation, and then the other, how do kids' thought processes change if we're trying to work with kids with difficult thought process issues, and how there's different ways people believe kids should change, and they're not right or wrong, they're just different. So you can imagine when we say to people, you got to pick 10 of these, there were folks that really struggled with which ones to pick. And when we started looking at the feedback, a lot of the feedback was the sessions were at the right time, they were really exciting, what we wish we would have had, okay, because we could have signed up for more sessions. So that was really good feedback and very helpful. I think the other thing we got a ton of feedback was for this.
Yeah, we had our own commissary come in and cater for us. So day one was a pasta bar, and day two was a taco bar. So we got, they also did coffee in the morning and muffins and scones so they could get their day started. One feedback on the survey was they wanted coffee all day. But it was very well received. They loved it. We heard nothing but great things about our catering, so that was good here. And then some of the other things we heard on our surveys, they enjoyed classes they took, nice lunch, always learning something new. Could take CPR again and first aid, and it was nice. We had prizes at the end of the day. We had Gibson and who else did we have? Everside donated things, but we had prizes donated. So we told names, and some of our classified staff walked away with prizes. Day one, the big prize was Apple AirPods, and day two was an Apple iPad. So they were really thrilled with that. But they just enjoyed having different perspectives, not only from the presenters, but from each other, because they got to meet other people in other departments that they wouldn't normally get to meet or interact with. So it was really good to see the camaraderie of people, you know, building teams together and having them have conversations. But yeah, overall, they wanted a third day. So we're wondering if maybe this could be something that we build into next year with maybe some more built-in e-learning days, to maybe take a day or two throughout the school year where they would have another day like this so that they can get some more PD, because they really felt valued and, you know, like they were just part of the district and learning the same things that they feel like everybody else is.
And I think that's what the real message was for the staff, and we told them directly. You know, a big part of this is to make sure that you get opportunity to make up some of the money that you lost. But the reality is that you're professionals. Everybody at Elkhart Community Schools helps kids learn. Whether you help kids learn by putting them on a bus and bringing them to be able to be taught, whether you clean a space for them to be able to learn, whether you feed them so they can pay attention, whether you provide therapy to them, we're all working together to help the kids learn. And the bottom line for me is folks got to do some things and learn some new skills to continue to help kids learn that might not normally be in their lane. It was very exciting stuff. So I think the other thing that we got a lot in the feedback was things were being well organized. And so I kind of have an ulterior motive for Charlotte to be here, because kudos really go out to Charlotte for making sure that the trains ran on time and things really kind of went pretty well. I think we haven't done this in about 4 or 5 years. And I think we learned where some of the kinks were that we would redo. But overall, just extremely positive stuff. We're pretty happy at the end. Any questions?
Just very impressive. When, you know, the original impetus is to make up those days for compensation. So you guys could have really gone one of two ways. You could have said, okay, let's have this, let's meet that need, and let's fill hours for anything, right? Or you could do exactly what you did. I think that's great. The topic, the engagement, the value. You brought a new perspective of saying, you know, you're just not a bus driver, or, you know, you are more than that. And I think that that's what I'm hearing you say, is that realization was there, that they realize that they are not just one little cause. They have a number of things that they can touch and feel and learn from. So the only problem I see, and I think you kind of addressed it, is should we not have bad weather in the future? I think you guys will continue to have to do this, so it's not 2 days, possibly 3. So it's a great job to get that feedback.
And kudos to the operations department, those administrators. I mean, we've been planning this since probably January, February, of how to make this work. And, you know, you saw some of the names up there that are administrators in that department, but they made sure their staff knew. They made sure that they had access to be able to say yes to things. And they came up with some of the ideas for training. I mean, we spent a while saying, what do our people really need to know that they don't? So
and we asked it on the survey too. It was good to get some of their feedback too, and what else they would like to know. So kind of build.
Very impressive.
Thank you for doing that.
Yep.
That would be a marketing thing too. You could take pictures or show videos.
we have some pictures from, we have a lot more pictures from the last one we did, but it was exactly like the same.
Yeah, because we can use that too when we're doing hiring process. You know, like this is what we provide, this is what, you know, the value is right there. Good job.
Yeah. Well done.
You don't have to explain. Please don't.
We would like to tell you about the DOT conference. Like, hey, there it is, the Do One Thing. So Dr. Shepard and I were talking about, at Dr. Falconer's request, in discussion instructional leadership, to provide a tier 1, we call it a symposium, And the
Nice
idea-
word, right?
I love it.
The idea was for our teachers to come together and really learn from each other. We always hear that they want more time to share, they want more time to learn from each other, they want more time to discuss. So as we took this idea into instructional leadership, Brian and his team came up with this fabulous name, the Do One Thing Conference, or the DOT, which the idea was, in the next slide, okay, right here, okay, that our focus would be on effective Tier 1 strategies for instruction and behavior, but the idea is that teachers would just take away one thing, with one strategy, with one thing that you would take away and that you would try. So hence it became the DOT conference. Our presenters were content specialists, so teachers presenting to teachers. We had great success with that. We were so proud of our teachers and our content specialists because the whole second semester we charged them with coming up with their own ideas, their own topics, and we're going to show you the variety of topics that we had for Tier 1 instructional strategies. Our instructional coaches were presenters. We had some principals that presented, some district administrators presented, as well as we had some guest speakers come in from outside as well. And here was our schedule. There's a link in there. I think that the variety of topics was so engaging, and we had really good attendance, which Brian is going to speak to in a minute. But you can see everything from the power of co-teaching. We had Tara Mix did a whole session on making jewelry, and that was pretty popular. Language mastery, all the way, read alouds, I won't read all of them, unit planning, and teachers could select from a variety of topics. The sessions were an hour, so they had the opportunity to go to different topics that they wanted if you scroll down. We had some math sessions, some technology sessions, NWEA, reading our benchmark data.
So in all, we had several sessions that were content specific in the different academic disciplines. But in addition to that, we had some general education topics as well for things such as creating a positive classroom learning environment, or some strategies that would be appropriate across all content areas at a specific level, whether that would be elementary or secondary. So with that variety, teachers have the ability to pick and choose what would work best for them. Right there.
Yeah, so my name is Brian Bennett. I'm the coordinator of professional learning for the district. So I touch a lot of PD, and I work very closely with the instructional technology team as well. So part of what we ended up with is we kind of had two major themes emerge as part of this event. The first theme was social emotional learning. How do we help our students deal with trauma? It aligns with a lot of the work our staff has done this year, learning about trauma and what it is, how it affects us emotionally, physically. And so Dr. Nancy Michael was invited by Dr. Tallheimer. She is a researcher, a neuroscience researcher at the University of Notre Dame, and she specializes in trauma and adolescence. And so she came and spoke to our staff. She led the first keynote, looking at the physical development of the brain as kind of our pair to what do we see trauma manifest as in our students. And she brought the science behind it to help our staff understand that this is not just a mental state, it is a physical state that it can affect a large population of our kids. So we had very good feedback on that, even though it was a high-level kind of science explanation. She was a very good, engaging speaker who got our staff to really see that trauma begins very, very young, and it can carry all the way through adolescence when they graduate. And so our staff were able to tie those pieces together and see the connections between what happens to them in the home, in schools, and then post-graduate. The second major theme that came out was our focus on accessibility, in particular our EL focus, so working with students who are not native English speakers. Sean Slack is a solution tree expert in language teaching. It's a Tier 1 strategy, so the idea being that every teacher in the district, every instructional employee in the district is charged with developing language in students, whether that student is a kindergartner coming in with low English skills on their own to level 0 EL student entering our district with EC tools. So Sean focused a lot on instructional strategies that we can put into any classroom. These are not content specific. They're not limited to our EL classes or our English classes. Things like you need 12 touch points on a form of language to form the mental capacity to use that language. So we did some role playing during that keynote where staff were given a new term that we had to then put into practice with each other in just a back and forth conversation with the person next to us. To model that it takes 1 minute to do that kind of activity, and the more we can do that across our classes, the more our students will be developing those language skills. So those keynotes were aligned again with our instructional professional development focuses for this year, and they'll let us carry those into our professional development next year as we continue SIOP training and we look at getting these methods and actions into the classroom. And as trauma continues, when we continue to look at, we focused on kind of the basics of trauma and what de-escalation can look like, but next year we're going to be actually focusing on classroom practices. How do we act as adults to make sure students are in safe, supportive environments all the time? Some other things that we thought might be interesting, we had about 160 registrations for each day, and we had about 120 that actually show up on each day. But we had every building in the district represented at some capacity. Several of the people who came were teachers. We had over 40 sessions over 2 days. We did not end up repeating any of them because everybody showed up. Excuse me. So every building was represented in some capacity over the school year. When we look at years of service, one of the criticisms, I guess, that I've faced in the past is that we're only catering to the young teachers because we're looking at technology and we're not making it accessible to some of our longer-term staff or people who are not as comfortable with technology. But what I think this shows is that we are hitting kind of that core group of Elkhart staff. So we have very few people in the 35-year service range because we have few staff in that category to begin with. But when we're looking at the bulk of our teaching staff, when we're hitting the 0 to 15 years of service in the district, that is the majority of our teaching staff. So we're providing enough variety and an accessible format for staff, instructional staff. And then I should have clarified this, is certified and classified instructional staff are invited to come. So special education paraprofessionals, classroom interventionists, people like that were also here rather than the academy days. They had choices. So our years of service, this is encouraging to me because we are hitting our main demographic of Elkhart instructional staff. We have a wide range of people. We're not skewed one way or the other, where it's only the brand new teachers or it's only kind of the longer serving teachers. But that also provides a good blend of people at the conference, because if I'm a first year teacher and I'm sitting next to someone who has 25 years experience, we can now have that instructional conversation about, I have no idea how to do this in my classroom, but so-and-so next to me can have that conversation and coach me and mentor me during that 2-day window. As far as our target age groups, another criticism or struggle, I guess, that tends to come up is that we don't serve grade bands effectively. So this one, we had the bulk of our sessions were in that K-6 range. A lot of our attendees were in the elementary age range. I don't know if this is because secondary is getting ready for summer school or what. We didn't really dive into it that deep, but just trying to say that we had a broad range of student ages also represented in the conference. And these aren't just K-6 could benefit from it. These are targeted strategies for elementary students. A lot of strategies on reading and writing. There was a session by a teacher who was looking at social studies, because a lot of times social studies can be one that's kind of pushed off. So she said, here's how we bring it to the forefront and fold in our writing and our speaking and our listening and all of these instructional pieces that we're hitting in the other content. And the last piece is our session topics. Like I said, our studios kind of broke out into social emotional learning and some of the trauma stuff. So again, accessibility, social emotional learning kind of go together. If we are providing accessible instruction, whether it's digital or in person or on paper and pencil, then our students are in a better mental state because they know they're in a safe, supported environment. And we're training our staff to not look at that as an added or as an extra, but as something that is just part of what our classrooms look like in Elkhart schools. Technology is always a big part of that because we provide those accessible environments using our technology. So we're getting staff to think about how they're creating materials that students can access and use from a language standpoint, and then from, again, that mental accessible standpoint. As far as feedback goes, this is about 420 responses. So we had a feedback form that people filled out after each session. So every presenter was given a customized report on feedback or containing feedback from whoever attended. So we're overwhelmingly meeting expectations, we're exceeding expectations of Elkhart staff. That tells me that we're doing relevant work, we are doing work that people are hungry for, we are doing and providing resources and sessions and topics that people are finding helpful. And these are, again, just a few pull-out quotes. So talking about the keynote speakers being knowledgeable, professional, and informative. It's great to have a neuroscience PhD come in, but if she can't talk to the people in the room, it's no good. So having somebody who can do both of those things and balance it out was well received. Looking at affirming our EL populations, some of these fringe populations that we don't bring to the forefront, but actually recognizing that we are embracing accommodations and teaching methods that serve those students in particular, and that's something that sets Elkhart apart. And then finally, we are constantly trying to revamp our professional development. We are looking for ways to bring new, relevant, meaningful, impactful professional development to our teachers, because then it transfers immediately to our students. My team is 4 people, but we have 900 certified classroom teachers that we can reach by looking and revamping and thinking about how we're providing professional development. And so looking ahead, we're thinking about, okay, next year, do we provide this at the same time? We have talked a little bit about providing a virtual option on some of our e-learning days so that we all don't have to flock to a location, but we have a virtual session or a virtual schedule that people can participate in from their buildings. So we're going to continue to push that envelope a little bit, continue to set Elkhart professional development as standout in terms of what we're providing, how we're providing it, who we're providing it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When it comes to like ELL, into a class that of different demographics and stuff, and their command of English language may not be so great. Okay, how do we reasonably expect a teacher who is not bilingual to actually educate that kid and get them up to par when I'm trying to teach math, and at the same time I'm also trying to teach a foreign language and learn a foreign language? That seems like an impossible task.
So there's 2 strategies that we focused on this year using sheltered instruction observation protocol, SIOP. I don't know if you've heard that term, but it's the EL instructional strategy we're using in the district. There's 2 components to that. The first one is what they call conversational language. How do we get the student to communicate in the target language, so English? But then the other side is the content language. And so we're working with our staff on how we support conversational English, just a daily interaction, but then strategies that also give grade level and reading, writing, speaking, listening level appropriate instruction. So things like we are defining our terms. There's a protocol you might see if you're visiting some classrooms. They're called our content objectives and our language objectives. So every content objective might be I'm going to be teaching a student about slope in a math classroom. But my language objective is just talking about what slope is and what it represents, not necessarily that they can do it at that moment, but that's the language component that we're developing in that student. And those are measured on 2 different scales. Our RETA access test is given in January. Yeah, okay. And that gives us a benchmark for the fall. So we know exactly where every student is on those 4 components of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And then we are going to support our staff this coming year by helping them look at their group of students and know exactly where those students are so that we can even zero in on. You might have a student who can read and write at a very high level, but who cannot speak at a very high level. So instead of giving them all of the strategies, we'll focus on speaking strategies with those students. So we're getting much more targeted in how we're serving that population. But we are also inclusive in our practices. We have teachers in the room, and there are EL support staff who come in to help the students at a second period of time. But it all starts with the classroom teacher providing that base of support using these strategies of content objectives and language objectives and partner with each other to provide both the context and the language of the content.
Thank you. The slope is the implementation.
Yeah, and without getting into too much depth, it allows us to bring out things like slope means different things in different contexts, right? So in the math context, we're teaching it here, but then whenever we're using that term in other places, that other teacher is giving them the new content that goes with it. But because we built the background in both of those places, that language acquisition process speeds up for that student.
What is the latest statistics on how many students we're serving through this process?
26
English, okay, 2,200 English learners in the district.
Thank you.
If you couldn't tell, we are very blessed to have Brian and his team with us here in Elkhart Community School. It's very interesting that we can take a concept and say, hey, wouldn't it be pretty nice if we did a, what do we call it, a deal, and put one together where the teachers could share their knowledge with one another on best practices. And when we shared that with Brian and his team, what they did with it is we'll get just the bounce off and do, well, you saw the responses from the staff who participated. And this is our first annual, and we hope that we are going to be able to weave it in, as Brian said, throughout the year, and we can get more and more teachers engaged and involved in this on both ends, both as receivers and as givers, because we know that it's through that professional sharing and practice that we get better. That's actually what PLC is all about. It's not just looking at the results, but it's looking at how did we get to the results that we did. In other words, what are we doing as teachers to get the results that we're getting, and what do we need to do to change the results that aren't exactly to where we want them. So we are really, really excited about that.
So then, moving on to June 6th and 7th, we had a 2-day retreat with our administrators. And the morning of June the 6th kicked off with Janelle Keating was our keynote speaker for that day. Janelle is the superintendent of White River School District in the state of Washington, and she has great experience with PLCs as a superintendent in her district. And her message was very, very powerful for us and for our leaders. She talked about that our building leaders, our principals really are district leaders, and that we're all on the same page, that we all need to be leading in the same direction, that we all need to be talking the same talk. She talked a lot about grit, that this is hard work, that you have to dig in every day. That was a big message that I took away from her, and that you can't give up in the process, that it's constantly learning, you make changes, you just stick with it every day. She talked a great deal about identifying district essential standards, which we did that this year for our English language arts, and are shortly going to be doing that for our math. So that's next for us, so it kind of reaffirms the work that we're doing, that we're on track. She talked about developing proficiency math and common formative assessments, which we've also been working very hard on, and looking forward to doing those proficiency maps here in the near future in the fall. On her website, I mean, I think our principals were amazed that everything was in one place. All of the artifacts were there for years of work that she had done in the district. And so that really gave us a good goal to achieve for, and to see some of the products that she had similar to what we have. So I think a lot of it was just reaffirming that we're on the right path.
That's right.
Then that first day in the afternoon, we actually looked at MTSS and had the different schools bring in a team. We have an MTSS, a district-wide implementation guide now that assists the staff in those teams to develop both an academic, I will let you go that, both an academic and a behavioral side to those MTSS teams. We've spent a lot of time with you all talking about MTSS and the components of MTSS, but as we went through the day, we highlighted again some of the stuff we talked about, how our PLCs and that MTSS process go together. Really looking at question 1 and 2, what do we want them to know, and how do we know what they know it? Really being that tier 1 piece, and then and then 3 and 4 really those questions of what do we do if they don't, and what do we do if they do, being how are we looking at targeted interventions in groups, and those individualized, both with academic, social, and behavioral systems. There was a lot of conversations about what are the different components of MTSS, and I would like to highlight that one of the most important components is leadership. So as we were going through, we talked about those leadership pieces and how those teams would work together, knowing that on tier 1, 2, and 3, the teams I'm going to spin down here a little bit and show you that there's a process here with an academic implementation plan that goes through a 4-step process, identifying what are our problems in this school, What are our problem analysis? Why is that occurring? How do we achieve that 80% standard benchmark? And some strategies under each of those. Instructional design and implementation. Now that we know identify the problem and we know where the problem is occurring, what are we going to do about it? And then lastly, how do we know if our interventions were effective? We then ask each of the buildings, because as you've seen some of the buildings, some of them really are striking tier 1 with some pretty serious fidelity. They're doing a really great job. And some of the others need work, right? And when we talked about the behavioral stuff, we heard from several behavioral principals who are putting PBIS into place in a very similar fashion. So what we ask them to do as building level teams is go through and identify, where are you with tier 1 as a specific building? Where are you with tier 2? And then where are you with tier 3? And their job over that day and some of the next day was to actually identify where they are so that we can start working individually with buildings and grouping buildings to tier 2 and 3. They're doing a much better job, and they need to focus on 2 and 3. And some that need at tier 1, we do a tier 1. Some great examples came out of this the next days after this. One of our principals who's doing PBIS really well sent all of her stuff from her building to every one of the principals and said, here's the stuff I'm doing. Because when we went through, we felt like on the behavior side, we were doing a pretty good job, and I would concur they were. So they got then the ability to start having communication with each other about how those things work. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And as a reminder, you have a copy of that in detail in your packet, in your news and notes.
So it allowed us, again, to focus on tier 1 for schools needing that development, and it differentiated those 2 and 3. We also talked a lot about PBIS for tier 1 with the expectation being that everyone is doing PBIS across the board. Our students move at a high rate for some of our students. Our school with the most, several years ago when we looked at our school with the most stability, K through 6 or K through 3, who started kindergarten in the same school they took I-read with, was 68%. And that was our school with the most stability. So when we look at pride and PBIS, it really becomes important for us to have a consistent way across the district as kids move. If they move it inside of our district, they're getting the same messages, which led us to clarifying the differences between guidance coalitions and MTSS. Because in the past, if you've been with Elkhart Community Schools for a period of time, you've heard things like general education intervention teams, behavior intervention teams. You heard things about PBIS, and once we merge these two things together, some of those vocabulary pieces for those of us who are, let's say, a little more veteran status, have come back, and we are confusing MTSS with what things used to be like in the past. So I think there was some really good communication about guiding coalitions really established that tier 1 intervention and tier 1 instructional models, both academically and behaviorally. It provides a framework. This piece really provides a framework for those behavioral and academic elements of the school improvement plan, and there's an expectation that every one of the buildings are looking at their MTSS implementation and those frameworks being part of their plan. And again, it connected the PLC goal for principal evaluations. Part of the principal's evaluation is, are those PLC goals in place? And you look at what your school improvement plan looks like and what that framework looks like.
And if I could just address this last piece, as we were having the conversations with Sean Slack, among the administrators, we were talking about the PSYOP component. So to go to this document, so to go back to your question, Mr. Weaver, when we're talking about what we do in the PSYOP framework, so we concentrate a great deal on lesson preparation. How do we build students' background knowledge? How do we help make sure that what we're giving students in instruction, they can comprehend and understand it, deliver to them at their level, and with those repeated touch points like Brian alluded to, the strategies that we're using, how are we interacting and building interaction among students in our classrooms, the practice and application, how do we deliver the lesson, and then what do we do for review and assessment. So those 8 pieces. And as you look at that, that's just solid, sound instruction for all students. That should really be the considerations you're doing with everybody. So this framework allows us to be very intentional about the way we look at that. So as we had the conversations with Sean Flack during the Do One Thing conference, the principals in a conversation with me came around and saying, if we're going to do one thing, we're going to concentrate on that lesson preparation piece. So the lesson preparation piece is where all of the other pieces come together because you're thinking about how you put the lesson together. So So again, here's reference to those content and language objectives like Brian alluded to. So the same thing that we were doing with asking teachers to walk away with one thing, the principals were saying, what's the one area that we can concentrate on together, that we're all speaking common vocabulary, we're all doing the same kind of work, and we decided on lesson preparation. So when we go back to the MTS implementation guide, what we're seeing in the Tier 1 academic portion is lesson preparation for SIOP is in everybody's plan as something they're all going to be working on, so that we can increase just attention to how we're framing lessons in general, but then how we're being intentional for that for our EL students. Then on the second morning of June 7th, just very quickly, I want to share with you that ULEAD and Rich Hussettler there on the right, who had shared with you all a letter at one point about the work that the district leadership team has been doing, brought a colleague, Daryl, along, and they helped us go into doing the work around the predictive index that we have been doing as a district team. So the predictive index is this tool, and I just want to very quickly just give you a couple glimpses of what it does for us. What it did is, through the grant that the DOE provided through ULEAD, is it provided us to be able to form 3 teams. So as I'm going to share the administrative teams with you. So as the administrative team, all of the members of the district leadership team took this instrument and we all received a profile of ourselves that gave us things like Myers-Briggs and other inventories that people have done on themselves. This was a similar thing. But it gave you kind of 4 core traits about yourself: being collaborative to independent, reserved to sociable, driving to steady, and flexible to precise, and gave you kind of where you fall, and then it provided you insights about yourself across those 4 domains, and what it means if one is a little over another, and those kind of things. The real power in it, though, came from when you start talking about it with teams. And so when we look at this team, what it does is it takes all the members of the team and places everybody. It takes everybody on the team and places them onto this 4-quadranted circle. And so on this circle, you have people who are very much interested in teamwork and collaboration, people who are interested in innovation and agility, people who are interested in processes, and then people who are results-driven and looking at the data piece. So what this does is it gives you a plotting of where people are most comfortable being. This does not mean this is where you are all the time, but this is where you're most comfortable operating from and how you like to work. And so this gave us a way to look at our team dynamics as an administrative team as we've gone through the last year. So similarly, when we looked at this, we wanted to give the opportunity to our elementary and middle and high school principals. So they took this instrument, and then in that morning work with Rich and Daryl, we did that predictive index. So they got their individual leadership styles back. There were conversations about what that does for them as teams, and then what that means for them. And we did a similar thing of where we gave So when we look at the results from this, I'll have to put those separately because I should have a tab here that allows me to show it. There we are. So we see that a vast majority of the administrators, building principals who support this activity, gave it 4s or 5s across those other measures. And then the comments were talking about how this has helped them. Some of them are wondering about doing this with their own teams in the building, speaking to the level of PD. So as we were looking at what Janelle had been saying about how district leaders and building leaders work together, that was our goal in looking at this, was to have us all be able to look at our styles a little bit, understand where people naturally want to gravitate and be, what that means we need to take into account, what that means for the team dynamic. And so between that and the work that we've spelled out in going forward with what we want to do with our PLC process, a district guiding coalition with principals and district leaders together, our goal is that we would be doing kind of work all at the same time. So I wanted to just give you a glimpse of what that is, because it really is connected to, again, trying to build off of what Janelle Keating was saying and making our professional learning communities work more valuable. And then very closely on the afternoon of the 7th, those teams came back together that had been working on the afternoon of the 6th to work on those MTS implementation plans. For us now to, as our next steps, review those plans to group schools into cohorts of like needs so they can learn from each other and that we can tailor what we're doing, differentiating our support of principals, teaming and sharing of our best practice ideas across the building, and then a comprehensive learning plan for PLCs, which will be part of the teaching and learning plan that we'll be sharing with you later this summer before this kickoff of the school year. And yesterday, Mindy and Brad led the instructional leadership team in an all-day brainstorming session of pulling those pieces together of what are the steps of where we need to be for PLCs and MTSS based on the preliminary things we've seen in those plans and where we know we need to be in that process overall. So my hat's off and appreciation to all of the people who presented parts of this to you this evening. You see the extensive work that went into everything that everybody's been doing to provide some valuable experiences for all of our team members here at the end of the school year and to help us be able to continue moving forward on our cycle of continuous improvement. And at that, we'll answer any final questions.
I have a question back on your MTSS plan. For Pride, I noticed that you've got a notation in here that the E equals empathy. What happened to efficiency?
Efficiency has been very difficult to do with some of the younger students in the district in terms of that, and it often follows under dependability and initiative, a lot of the things that you would say there anyway. And then seeing that the issues we have with students not socially interacting with each other appropriately and behaving, we all felt that making the move to empathy made more sense in terms of doing that. And that also allows you, with the empathy piece, to be able to highlight collaboration as a 21st century skill and the kind of things that employers are looking for.
But doesn't efficiency, dealing with, turning things in on time, being prepared, that's all part of it? Right, that's all part of it too.
So they should be covered under the other letters in the PRIDE acronym. And so the E allows us to address something that specifically was asked.
So did that come from Horizon directly as a,
No, we have these discussions because as you're looking at the capital competencies and the things that are driving conversations around SEL, just generally, not just specifically the capital piece, but there have been lots of conversations about if we're finding that students are having difficulty relating to other, and Tony can speak more to this, but one of the things that we want to address is how can we build that sense of understanding and respecting each other beyond just respectfulness in terms of respecting an authority, but how do we build that with other people so that you can work successfully?
Right, well, but just in saying this, okay, so that's where also comes the job you're reading, okay? Efficiency follows what Ann was saying about, the academics, teaching kids. Like one of the things that we had was when the presentation happened about the high school and saying that, we're going to let homework be turned in, at any time, and we're not going to follow that, and if they get past the test, it goes back to like our promise of getting everybody career and college ready. But respectfulness would be where empathy would fall, instead of taking out efficiency, which is something that, I understand we have the CASL model, but again, it goes back to, I know I get, banged all the time for saying academics, education, but, and I'm not trying to, I just want to finish, Tony, is that SEL can't always trump academics. And that is by replacing efficiency, again, it's another strike against the academics and back into the social emotional learning. And also, when you made this administration team, did a questionnaire go out to the principals and the different administrators to see if that was something that they were interested in changing? Because we built a whole program around pride. And so now we have to turn around and redo it again because we're switching excellence to empathy.
So I will say, and I'm gonna come from the PBIS end because that's kind of my knowledge base.
Right.
When you look at your data and you look at your information as a district or as a building team, the beautiful part about any kind of PBIS plan is you target what you're seeing currently. What we all had conversations with, we had a huge concern about behavior. It had become much more concerning for this group, and I think for most groups. And so you have to change a little bit about what we're going to do instructionally to be able to have kids do those things. So part of our look at our data, and when we reported data last time, we reported that the behavioral data really is down from the pre-pandemic year, except for fighting. And so if we're going to address something that is a big issue that's really driving some of the behavior, we have to have kids figure out how to get along with each other because we've lost 2 years of that instruction by being in school. Most of our kids were not at home with other people that were inside of a school environment. When my 3 kids were at home, I would get squabbles and things like that, but I treat them like I would treat them. I wasn't putting them in with 30 other people. So a big part of the timeliness of looking at data, and when you're looking at PBIS, is you want to tackle the things that are showing now. We can always talk about efficiency inside of initiative and inside of dependability. Those are things that are also very important. But what I heard from this group, both administrators and board members, is we need to tackle behavior. That was a very clear indication from everybody in this room right now about something we wanted to tackle. And a way to do that is target that behavior, make plans towards that behavior, and then teach those students what our expectations are here, and do it district-wide. Because when we looked at the behavior, it wasn't just one building. If you're looking at the data and you're seeing from the data our problem is just in this one spot, you just concentrate on that one spot. That really wasn't what the data was saying. The data was saying our kids really had a hard time coming back together and knowing how to be together. We really need to concentrate on that for a period of time. And then if we're looking at the data and then we see something else, then we can come back together and say, we probably have to change what we're doing now because this is really working. How do we change our focus again?
Well, and with absolutely no disrespect, our data shows that our academics are very low also. So how do you, when you can put empathy in with respectfulness, how do you take out efficiency when we're struggling there also?
Yeah, I don't think we take it out, but I think that it's very difficult when we're having conversations about wanting to make sure that everyone across the board behaviorally, if we're going to have a profound focus on behavior, the one area out of the 5 that we really talked about behavior would be empathy. Okay. We would have a profound focus in that one while still not losing the others. Because if I'm gonna look at Mr. Weaver here because I know his business background.
I have no empathy.
But if I'm at work and I can't figure out somebody coming in to buy things off me is having a bad day and I can't read down on them, I'm not gonna be able to sell to them. If I'm going in to make sales with somebody, if I know what they want, I'm gonna be more likely to streamline our time. So part of that empathy piece is also teaching people those employability skills. How do I get along with the other people I work with? How do I get along with the other people that I'm going to serve?
Was there discussion with the pride teams on if this was, or did this just come from a discussion from the administration team and that it was presented? Like, did across the board, did everybody agree that this was the change that needed to be made?
I will say that I don't know that there was a conversation with every principal in the district about moving data. There was a district-wide look at what the data was saying, and then knowing we needed a profound focus on something to be able, because it wasn't just one building, it was happening in lots of places. And it's not just happening in Elkhart. I don't
No, it's not, but yeah.
Yeah, and so we want to make sure to take care, and so that's where, and it fit in with still it still fit in with the expectations of employability. We have to be able to get along with other folks.
But isn't that things that, as I remember, with the SEL lessons and stuff that all the schools by grade level are doing, empathy was built into that.
Right.
So if we're already building that into the lessons and stuff we're doing, why are we adding?
They're not obviously being done to the level that we're wanting them to be done.
Right.
If they're not given that emphasis, that's part of the reason that we want to emphasize it, is so that it is something that we're surely hitting and making sure that we're doing with students. I mean, that whole piece of collaboration and getting along, getting out from behind your phone, understanding where other people are coming from, all of that are critical skills that we're determining that and we see students need. I mean, you read anything, you look at stuff from Janet Twang, you look at anything that's going on, this whole piece is grossly absent in a lot of our students. As Babette has sometimes said, it's very easy to stay consumed in that phone, and if nobody's teaching you how to get out of that or how to do that, then we need to help do that. And school, laced in with instruction, literacy, other things that we're doing can become avenues for doing that.
I'll get rid of the phone. Get rid of the phone.
Or we teach them.
Or, right, but my bigger concern is when we talk about staff, and one of the things that they speak out about is not being part of a conversation that changes something that they do. I guess this is another concern that I have.
But there are some staff members who have been.
Okay.
I think what she's trying to say, overall, not just one or two, but like a bigger effort to say, here's our recommendation as a leadership team. Who else should be at the table to share this and maybe fill in some gaps that there might not be? I think that's what she's saying. An overall collaborative initiative.
Yeah, we built the initiative of Pride, so I can see like taking empathy and adding it in and bolstering that up and being like, hey, part of this, we're gonna take the empathy and make it bigger, but to change the whole acronym that has been built on the way that the kids already have their goals seems like it would have been a bigger conversation with staff.
There was a question or comment right over here. Do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, with the pricing and changing it to empathy, I think when, what was it before, efficiency, you get natural rewards by being efficient, whereas empathy isn't always naturally rewarded. And I think it's good for kids to have the option to be rewarded for the empathy, you know? And there's not really room for that anywhere else other than in like the Pride Award system.
In the respectfulness, but we have to also this, and I agree with you, but we have to definitely stay where we're at too, with concentrating on academics.
I agree with that, but I do think efficiency is intertwined naturally, whereas empathy isn't always a natural consequence or a natural reward, whereas efficiency does provide like that natural reward of getting grade or getting to go somewhere extra or whatever. And empathy within the child isn't so much. And for me personally, I'd rather work with somebody who might not like work as hard as me, but will be nice to me. So I think that quality is more important as somebody in the workforce too, that so that like that goes back to the workforce part of.
And also empathy, if we're talking about academics, we're talking about trying to keep all of this disruption and fighting down. If we help teach kids with some opportunity for them to really understand thinking about another person from their perspective. That's the one thing right now feels missing. It feels as though the bullying and other things that are happening is this disconnect of how to understand the other person from their shoes. If those things are better and the classroom is less disruptive, then more learning occurs. So I feel like it does provide better opportunity for learning if that's a piece of this. And I think it is different than respectfulness because that's still kind of like a command to be respectful of your teacher. It's different when you're actually teaching a child to think from within and to think about others. It's just, and that is one thing that I think that is going to be really, really helpful. I'm happy about it. I don't know if I'm happy that it was changed without more probably input from others, but I'm really happy about that word and the meaning behind it and what I think it's going to offer us. But I think it would be great, you know, if we could get broader input to make these changes so that it feels more accepted system-wide.
And I think you'll see that shortly. One of the things that we identified in our PBIS plan was the elementary need a consistent behavior intervention system for discipline. When discipline happens, we should have some similarity across the school, and we'll be working with all of the with them about that, we talked with Brad about using some time when they're naturally together to be able to do that, so that they can all have a voice as we're planning with them.
Tony, you had mentioned earlier, that there was one principal that you kind of thought did all these things, and they sent it out to everybody else. Could you send that to the board also?
Okay.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I got a question along those same lines. I think it's great the principal's starting to communicate.
Yeah.
As they've been successful. Also, one of the focuses of this was, you focused on tier 1 for schools that needed development. Who's making that determination?
They are.
Internally?
Because there's actually two assessments. There's something called the school-wide evaluation tool, the SET, and then the BOQ, the benchmarks of quality on the behavior side. They're standardized, research-based assessments, and so you have to hit certain markers to be able to say, yeah, I'm doing this at tier 1. And one of them's an external and one of them's an internal, but they all have rubrics. So that would be a way to inform us where they really are, and their answers back from those questions would help indicate whether they're hitting those markers or not. So there's some accountability pieces. It's not, Dr. Shepard and Dr. Higginson come up and say, hey, Tony, we're there now. I mean, there really has to be some accountability to, here's how you're proving that you're there, and here's how you're there.
And across both the academic and the behavior pieces of their plan, we're asking for artifacts that become demonstrable evidence of what they're doing.
And then that can be part of their evaluation.
And what is that process of holding them accountable to these things? Is that part of the
So as we had as one of the bullet points, their academic and behavior implementation plan becomes part of their PLC goals for their evaluation process. And so the artifacts they submit is evidence of meeting those goals.
Okay, thank you.
And then those
There's
are
a lot of
embedded, and then those goals are embedded in, they all work together.
Work together.
Not doing this, and I have to put that aside and do that.
And folks, clearly, I don't think you can do good academics if you don't have good behavior. You can't have good behavior if you don't have good academics. The number one indicator for decreasing problem behavior in a classroom is academics taught well, right? And so those SIOP lessons become really important because they help some of our students who need a different way of learning to learn when we plan those things out. So if we don't think we should do one without the other, we need both. Correct. Clearly need both.
Is there any more questions before we take a short break before the board meeting? All right. Please adjourn. We'll take a
Thank you.
5 minutes break.
I think I didn't understand that. A lot of it.
I get it.
It takes me a little while to.
No, it's fine. That's fine.
Isn't that funny? We're both on.
I'm going to call the meeting to order if you guys want to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Elkhart Promise. Every student is known by name, challenged and supported by highly effective staff, and in partnership with the community, they graduate career, college ready, and life ready.
Thank you, Kelly. So we have invitation to speak protocol. If you want to fill out, there should be a half white sheet on your chairs. If you want to fill that out and give it to Dora, you'll have 3 minutes to speak at the end of the meeting. Next, we'll have a moment of pride.
Good evening. So it is my pleasure tonight to talk about the Elkhart Summer STEM Camp, and we have a few guests that are joining us. David Wagner is online there virtual, and I'm going to have David introduce himself in just a second. I'm from the source, and I'm also going to invite Dan Walsh to come up with me tonight. Dan is one of our secondary high school teachers at Elkhart High School, and I believe going to the ECS. And Dan will introduce himself in a few moments. So last summer, actually before last summer, Dan came to me very excited about a curriculum for the Civil Air Patrol. And I didn't know anything about the Civil Air Patrol, but I had been working with Douglas and with our science committee, and being so excited about all that I had learned about science, was really interested in what Dan had to present. And so after learning about the curriculum, which I'm going to tell you about, I told Dr. Thalheimer, and we had a meeting with Dan, and Elkhart Summer STEM Camp was born. And last summer was our first run. We had approximately 85 campers. It's all free to students, so there is no charge. The students engage in hands-on projects. We have some pictures that we're going to show you. Dan's going to talk all about it. His passion for the content is just so evident with the students, but it's an awesome opportunity. They can go to our regular summer school in the morning and then take a bus over to the site in the afternoon. And this summer it will be next door to high school. And we will have 8 teachers that will be working in summer STEM camp this year. So I'm going to have Dan, well first we're going to have David present. As part of the funding for the camp, we are using ESSER dollars, but the ESSER dollars will not pay for certain things. We want every camper to have a t-shirt. We want every camper to be able to have some snacks and some water in the afternoon, so that's a full day, so you're going to summer school in the morning. And in addition to that, the projects that they engage in require items like, I'll tell you about this, potatoes and bread and different food type things that federal grants will not pay for. So we applied for a grant and are so thankful that we got the grant. And so David is here tonight to talk about that and present us with that. So David, I'm going to turn it over to you at this point, and then I'll turn it over to Dan.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Perfect. All right, so thank you so much for inviting me here. My name is David Wigner. I'm a children's public mental health at the source, and one of my big roles is coordinating the child dashboard. So this is what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. The child dashboard is a first in the state data dashboard that looks at indicators that share a little glimpse about child well-being and safety in our community. So we have 50 indicators. We have both publicly available data and local data. So we have 14 local organizations sharing data with us, all towards giving that glimpse into how we're doing as a community with children's safety and well-being. We have 60 partners that have signed on to be a part of this effort. Elkhart Community Schools is one of them. And Mindy was mentioning there some mini grants that we've been giving out, which I'll kind of discuss a little bit down the way, but we've been able to give out almost $60,000 in September towards mini grants. And these mini grants are small efforts, small projects, but are geared towards having an impact on the community. And we received since September the launch 41 mini grant applications. Just to give you a quick background, this is the child dashboard. What you'll see red, green, and gray. Green means that those indicators are going in a desirable direction, a positive direction. Gray, there isn't any much change. Red is that it's going in an undesirable direction. And you'll see two sets of columns here. We have protective factors on the left. Those are things that enhance a child's ability to be successful with good outcomes. Risk are the opposite, right? Things that get in the way, barriers that complicate success for the child. So there's that. Each indicator of the 50 has its own data set. So if you click on one of those data indicators, you'll see a page that looks similar to this one. It'll show you why we're tracking the indicator, give you some background data, definitions about what it is, why are we tracking this, and our methodology about how we came about it. A few things that we've observed. Upstream is a focal point that a lot of our effort in Elkhart County it should be directed towards. A lot of those things that at the insight may not necessarily seem like a big deal, but will have downstream consequences. And one of those big things that we've been noticing is that there's an increase in need, whether it be mental health, whether it be behavioral, and there's always resources that should go along with that, but we've been seeing in our community that a lot of those resources just haven't been able to meet that demand. With these mini grants, a lot of them have been actually targeting child distress. So a lot of kids coming out of the pandemic have been observed and been in conversations with leaders in a lot of need. So a lot of our data mini grants have been targeted towards this area, and the schools have been an essential part in being able to find new programs and be able for us to support those programs. Elkhart Community Schools has been a leader in applying for mini grants, and they have a lot of great creativity, a lot of insights into what will help kids in this time that we live in. For instance, the School Without Walls, they have a program called I Am We, which is a mentorship program for girls. That's something that they've observed, that the need that they have observed within their school body is a need for positive role models, and we were able to support them. As Mindy mentioned, the STEM Aerospace Summer Camp program, being able to expand that has been something that the more kids we reach with high quality programs like this, provides them additional learning opportunities during the summer and equips them better to perform in the following school year. So these small amounts of money, Sean McCrindle, one of our funders from Basher Children's Home, he put it pretty nicely in that $2,000 really isn't a large pot of money, but the more small mini grants that we get out into the community creates some momentum. So momentum towards addressing this challenge, this trend of child distress. So that's what's really hopeful in this work that we do. And I just wanted to briefly show a quick video that kind of goes over some examples of some mini grants. So hopefully all the tech stuff works out and you are able to hear everything. It's about a 5-minute video.
Ignite Infinity is all about cultivating healthy lifestyles through movement, connection, and service. And so we are excited to offer programs to adults and to kids. And so that's why we're excited to set this great grant money for our after-school program.
So we're excited that with this grant, we're going to be able to provide Warrior Kids after-school program for kids going into 4th and 5th grade. We are going to teach them how to exercise and move, connect with each other. They're going to be reading a book called The Way of the Warrior Kids that will instill positive values.
I think one of the reasons we really wanted to start this was because what we've learned, especially the past couple of years, is how much we value relationships. We value being together and having conversations with each other that are hard, but really important as we go through this life. And so I think we want to offer that to the kids, help them, teach them healthy behaviors that will help them when the barriers and the struggles of life come, and give them a good foundation.
We're just excited that we can provide it without any barriers.
We're really excited about the mini grant that we received from the source to support our social workers and school counselors in continuing their work in trauma-informed practices. The book Classroom 180 by Heather Forbes was a resource that many were interested in using to continue growing their own practices and trauma-informed practices, and also being able to support additional work in their schools and other educators. We're excited to be able to provide this book and continue learning.
We had recently applied for a grant to provide grief bags for our students who attend here. We saw that grief was kind of an unmet need here at our school. We have a lot of students who lost people through the pandemic. We had students who were just upset and destroyed when a pet had died because it's someone they had known their whole life. We also have noticed when the students have lost someone that they love, that they've had trouble focusing, they're pretty teary in class, and they just kind of really need to talk about it and process it. We felt like we needed to connect with them and help them find resources to kind of work through grief. This is one of the grief bags. So we have those bags, and then we give them a folder that has like local resources and a letter in it, and like 10 ways to help a grieving child. So it's just a way that we wanted to help families through the grieving process and give them some ideas on what to do, because it's hard to know how to help your kids through grief. It's just a great way to like physically give them something and give them hope, for healing.
I'm so excited to be awarded the Dashboard Mini Grant for my social work team. It's been a very difficult couple of years for social workers in our community, and they've just been asked to do things that we never expected we were going to ask them to do. And I wanted to get this grant to just say thank you to them. The hope is that we're able to retain our staff and make sure our staff feel appreciated, and we just want them to feel that, whatever they're doing every day, that we see it and we appreciate them.
We are sitting in our new reset area. We got a grant from the source. We had a vision to have a place where kids could come and reset if they're feeling dysregulated, they needed some quiet time. There's some kids that just need to sit, they don't want to talk. And so our vision was to have the space for that.
So one of the things we wanted to share with you guys too is the data that we've been able to collect since starting the reset room. And so one of the things that we've noticed is since starting the reset room in January, it is mostly being used by our 9th graders. So we're able to see a big chunk of our students that 9th graders are adjusting to life at the high school, especially post-pandemic, that are having some trouble and need a place to regulate before going back to class. Definitely think that it's would be used well. K through 12 students will, I think, learn those coping skills that they don't always have to have a certain person to go to regulate and feel like they can re-engage with their daily activities, but certainly that they can learn that they can get through some tough times in life by just learning those coping skills.
We just want to thank the source for the Data Action Mini Grant. It has allowed us to offer darkness to light trainings to our community. So far, we've trained about 11 people. We're hoping to expand those numbers We have some trainings in the community coming up, as well as the trainings we're having at CAP. We're also going to start offering some of the supplemental trainings that Darkness of Light offers. So these trainings will allow individuals to continue to expand their knowledge on how to prevent child abuse and neglect.
Hi, I just want to say thank you to the Source for sending the social workers to the INSWA conference this year. It was so great to hear from others and build a community of social workers throughout the state of Indiana. Thank you.
Thank you, Source.
So that was just a quick video of some of the efforts that are currently happening in our community. So that's, if you're interested in checking out the child dashboard, it's just childdashboard.org. You're more than welcome to log in there, check out some of the data that we have on there, and also videos, more articles, and things like that. But kind of wanted to stop there, pass it on to Mindy and Dan. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those as well.
Yes, can you hear me? I have one question.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Dave?
Yes.
One of the early presenters in your video right there used the term passive values. What is the definition of passive values?
Yeah, did you mention, did you say passive values?
Yes, they're passive, P-A-S-S-I-V-E. At least that's how the print is on the bottom of the screen.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So, I mean, passive values, I mean, I think a lot of those are terms, generally speaking, for things that as a society, we're like expecting others to know and understand. So things like respect, things like being able to share, a lot of that kind of like things that we kind of expect of each other. And oftentimes maybe kids, as they develop, maybe they don't have those opportunities to get those.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
While I speak, there's going to be a presentation in the background with some of the photos from the camp. I'm Dan Walsh. This is my first year in Elkhart Community Schools. I taught physics and integrated chemistry and physics at high school. I was at another school, Brand X. I was refraining from mentioning this. That's when I met Dr. Higginson. I was a student at first in the IU Ed Leadership Program, and I came to her with this idea of using the Civil Air Patrol curriculum. I was running a Civil Air Patrol squadron at Adams High School, and one of the outreach things for this Civil Air Patrol program is a K-6 STEM program. It has 21 modules. They're all aerospace related, and 12 of them are aerospace specific, and then the remainder are physical fitness or character development. We modified the curriculum to fit into a 3-week period and test piloted it last summer. But that wasn't the first time that I ran this with another school. I was able to do this with Madison Team Academy as one of my case studies in one of my classes in the IUSC program. And we saw a 30% increase in student knowledge because each of the modules and the curriculum guide is going around for the 6th grade. Each of the modules come with a summative and a formative assessment. So the teachers, this all encompasses. Teachers don't have to come up with the curriculum, it's all NASA-based. All the evaluation, all the curriculum, all the supply lists, everything is self-contained. So I was able to get Madison the $4,000 grant. They implemented this classroom 2 years ago. As I said, they had a 40% increase in knowledge of the students, and we had a similar increase last summer amongst the 85 students as well. So it's consistent in terms of what we saw with our students and what I saw with Madison Steam Academy students in terms of knowledge. Part of the effort last summer was to get at some of the learning loss that the students were having, not having been in the classroom, but also some interaction and some, just face-to-face and hands-on learning. So we ran this at Ethos last summer and have moved it to high school this year. The curriculum doesn't stop here. Any teacher can sign up for the curriculum for $35 with Civil Air Patrol and become a member of Civil Air Patrol, and they get the curriculum and can actually implement it in their classroom, which is what I did with Madison Steam Academy. And potentially this could be something that could happen to the Elkhart schools. But as I said, the 10 modules allow a teacher to have curriculum to work 1 month throughout the school year, and they can extend that beyond just the STEM interaction, but also literacy and other involved in that. But there's a lot of student interaction and teamwork that goes into that. As Dr. Higgins had said, I'm passionate about STEM and aerospace. I flew maritime patrol aircraft for the United States Navy for 20 years before coming into teaching. So I came into teaching through an alternative path. But I was fortunate to get that education that I had from Notre Dame because the U.S. government paid for that. So trying to influence kids at this age where they're trying to make that decision, this is the critical age point from K to 6, whether they're going to like it or not, or pursue this type of thing. And I just really enjoy trying to influence students and educate them on technical aspects. I was privy to because somebody else saw benefits to pay for my education. If there's any questions, I'll take those now.
First and foremost, thank you for your service. We appreciate that.
Always a pleasure.
And secondly, the thing that got me to college was interest in aviation and stuff like that. So I went to Purdue and I have a background in aviation and electronics. And you probably know the instructors from the Air Force Junior ROTC program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I kind of look at this a little bit as maybe a feeder program into their ROTC program. I don't know if you thought about it.
Oh, absolutely. This is how you recruit kids at a young age and introduce them, and that is part of the charter for that program. Air Force ROTC and Civil Air Patrol to go out and help the teachers in the classroom implement these. So that's what I was doing with Madison Steam Academy, trying to lay the groundwork not only for STEM education, but recruiting students.
One of the things that I see, at least my observation, is that the Air Force Junior ROTC is kind of what I call a sticky program. Hey, my buddy's doing it, let's go do it together. And, it's like a football athletics program and stuff like that, those feeder programs to get kids in there. And then where I'm going with that is that my also observation of it is that those kids in there that have social, emotional issues and, those self-esteem issues and stuff like that, I don't know what those two instructors do, but they seem to cure a lot of it, and I think they're fantastic. We're very fortunate to have those, and I don't know how they do what they do, but it seems to me like that's a program that if we can get kids starting at where you're at and keep drafting them right along into those programs, that one will have less, behavioral issues and also much stronger academics, and thirdly, they'll be much better prepared to graduate in citizens along the way. So,
and you're right, it is a citizenship program. Ironically, when I retired from the Navy in 2005, I ran a high school Navy program in South Chicago, Chicago Science Park. Commuted from here to there every day and back. And it was rewarding from the perspective that if I get a kid in the program for 1 year, we had a 95% graduation rate from school and had a 65% for lunch.
Cool. That's exactly what we're looking
And we went from 120 students to 225 in 4 years.
you know, we're looking for a third instructor in the ROTC program. Would you be interested?
I'm the wrong place. That's why I had to commute to Chicago to do it, because the service are service specific about that.
Wow.
But I've been trying to talk to them. The Air Force, the Civil Air Patrol is a subsidiary of the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow there's got to be a way to say, you know, we can fold in some of the right things.
Right. Well, if you want to do Navy stuff, I live on the water out here and stuff like that. You can put a boat behind the house. We got boats. You can come out, teach them rowing, swimming, and
I am in withdrawal because we're too far from the coast. I've spent most of my time on both coasts and overseas through 35 different countries as well as Iceland. We've always been in the water. I'm within withdrawal right now.
well, don't discount us. We got 32 miles of shoreline behind the house there, right here in Elkhart.
Dan, how many people is that you spend this on?
Yeah, we have 85.
85.
Great.
You want
That's
to give a breakdown of the, like,
I passed around.
Is that what that in here? Okay.
Analysis from last summer.
From last summer,
So
okay.
Dan did a very thorough
Yeah, I know.
analysis of last summer, so then we'll do it again this summer. Our goal is we would like to have 120 students
Okay.
this summer. So we have sent 2 big pushes out before school was out. We sent one probably end of April, beginning of May. Then we sent another one 2 weeks before school let out. And we had some more enrolled. And so we'd like to do maybe a third push out, to do it Facebook or.
That's the same with Facebook and.
Yeah, doing it that way. But we still have registration coming in every day, and we'll take them all the way through. I mean, our goal is 120 students.
Okay.
So we would like to get to that point. And it's all free of charge. It's very engaging, as you can see. I went several times last summer. One of my favorite pictures up here is the culminating event at the end. Is them took all of the kids to the airport, and they actually were in the bus, and they rode down the runway like they were taking off. And then they got to go up in the tower. We were all up there, and they got to hear a plane land and take off. So they got to hear all of the radio communication, and it's just, I've learned so much from Dan, just being exposed to all of this. He is absolutely the right person. He's so dedicated in every detail. I mean, every detail. I didn't have to worry about anything. He had everything down to pick up, drop off, details, organization. I think the teachers had the opportunity to fly or go up in an airplane.
We had
at the end.
4 of the 6 teachers got an opportunity to fly in Civil Air Patrol aircraft. Because as an aerospace educator, they're given an orientation flight so that they can bring that back to the classroom. But not only that, for $35 gives them access to free STEM kits. They order them to their classroom. And yet there's multitude of resources that this will come up to. $35 is nothing, which is why we pitched for the grant too, to be able to pay for that as well. We couldn't come out of ESSER.
ESSER dollars is if you're limited on what you get, or like all of the extra things that you can get. We have returning teachers coming back this year.
Two of our
Program last year. Cambria.
I was just, I'm in the job.
She's having similar in the coming, and then Robert Keaton was with us last year, so he'll be joining us again. And we called, families that we had last year, and I believe we have quite a few returning students that are coming back.
That's
So that
awesome.
kind of goes to that pipeline that you have, getting the interest in it. So I love it. I'm excited. I'm very thankful to Dan and very thankful, David, if you're still online, very thankful for the grant. We greatly appreciate the extra hours. So.
And
Wait,
one of the synergistic effects too is that the Center for Civic Innovation students that are doing research at ETI are actually going to come over and do volunteer work with us because they have a required volunteer component to their program, so they're going to come over and volunteer in the classroom to help out the teachers too. They're Elkhart High School students, and your point, I could have enlisted some of the cadets from the Civil Air Force, our JROTC program. They're off on some of the
mean, I think, one of the things that I really like about it is, it's hands-on, but it's also connecting what they're learning with real-life things so they can make those connections. I know we're doing that a lot in our pathways with different jobs and stuff, but being able to tie it to going out to the airport, seeing a plane, getting into a tower, that's a big deal, because it enables them to do that, and it makes it more exciting and hands-on for them, and it puts all the puzzle pieces together for them.
We're fortunate to have Elkhart Airport because I tried to do this in South Bend, and because of some of the security issues, I could never get into the tower there. Here at Elkhart, I can do that. And I was bringing my students from Adams over to this airport. We just, as far as the bus is concerned, we just can't get the bus driver to go fast enough. Just got their arms out. That's so cool. And we've got lift, it's just not enough.
No. Every week, Dan would call and say, okay, I have a question for you. So this week, we're taking kids to the airport. We're going to be going on runway to bus. And they're going to need shoes with that. And I'm going, yeah, I'm going to go. Then now we're going to take t-shirts up in airplanes. Is that okay? Okay, Dan, I got to call. I'm not sure, but let me, so it's like exciting.
Well, yeah, I have a question and a comment. My comment is, when I look through that book, I'm very surprised that there is character building, leadership, physical fitness. That's not what I was.
It's all the military.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that, so I think that's great. Well, my question is, how much diversity do you get with the participants?
Oh, I can answer part of that question. There's a lesson in there on the Tuskegee Airmen.
Doug, I said on the participants.
Well, no.
That participate in the program.
Well, the kids participating in learning, right?
And we did not break down the demographics.
But we will.
That would be a good.
But just off the cuff, do you get a lot of minority students that participate?
We had about 20%, 25% Hispanic, and probably about 10% African American, just from recollection. And the rest were white.
Is there any planned effort to try to promote that more with those groups, to get more kids from those groups to participate?
I think it's kind of what I call a self-licking ice cream cone. When the kids like what they're doing, they will tell their friends. So we've got to sell it from that standpoint, because they're not going to come just because I tell them I want them to come. I think we need to be able to sell it to the kids internally. That's why some of the outreach in the schools can help sell that. If we can get some of the teachers here actually teaching these lessons in their classrooms and then selling this to their students, I think that will help. And trying to promote this, as I did at Madison, every one of the teachers was using it. And Madison is 95% everything.
I just think it might be a good idea to be more intentional, because those groups wouldn't naturally have an interest or have exposure as some of the other groups. So a more intentional targeted effort might be a better approach to get those two groups involved.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We love that experience. Okay, up next we have the consent item. Is there a motion? Move to approve.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Okay, here we go. $50,000 from NIPCO for the ETI robotics lab. It's the naming right, so, thank you, Rex Martin and NIPCO. $4,000 has been given to the music department, $3,000 designated for basic materials, $1,000 designated in support of junior high musical education from Amanda Jameson, the Community Foundation. We have $340 worth of camera equipment from Jeff Ross of Barletta Boat to Bristol Elementary. $1,000 from Gruncher Motorsports. They donated a ATV mower for the motorcycle outdoor power technology plant, so that's from the Gruncher Motorsports. let's see, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Jared O'Brien donated $326.03 to purchase native plant plugs for habitat improvement for native prairie, for the agriculture department. $500 from the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, Jessica Merkling, and that will be for habitat improvement again. There's a lot here. Pheasants Forever donated $320 for native pollinator seed mix. That's from Ryan Owen and Pheasants Forever. Again, Cheers to Wheels, $1,200 used towards toolboxes for 2 graduating students to attend a trade school. Awesome. That's from Barb White. See, Jackie Rod, she received $1,000 for the volleyball team from Jason Pike and Patrick Industries. So Brandon appears to be the winner of this state of awards. So thank you, community.
And I just have a comment. Can we get any information on an update on where we are from staffing so far, what we're looking at? Where's Maggie?
She was going to share that in the personnel report, but
Okay.
or later, but we can do that now.
Oh, okay, it's part of the consent agenda, so I wasn't sure when they were.
Good evening, everyone. I have some forms here for you, but it might be easier for visual rather than me just throwing out numbers out.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Very helpful. What you have in front of you is a broken down list of the different vacancies that we have throughout the district. It's broken down by elementary. Also, you'll be able to see the middle schools as well as the high schools, including the Career Center and the Elkhart Academy K. So you will be able to see in 2 different columns the grade level vacancies that we currently have posted, as well as those positions that are such as exceptional learners, EL, and those that are something special or electives. So we want to make sure that we're focusing. I know that our priority is to ensure that we have staff in the classrooms when we start the fall. So I'd like to break down the importance that our classroom and content area are at our focus. And then, of course, we also are looking at filling the other positions as well that are in support roles. As of right now, we've hired 47 new teachers that will be starting next school year. We hired 6 at the beginning of second semester, so they're already working and will be coming back in the fall. And in regards to our outreach, we continue to reach out to the different universities that we're already working with, as well as those that are in the neighboring state of Indiana, such as Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, to make sure that we're also posting on their job boards, as well as the ICOE as well, and LinkedIn and Nimble, which is the IDE website. So we continue to do those outreach programs that we normally do. And then also with our student teachers, we hired a good number of our student teachers that we placed last school year, this school year. So we've hired a total of 7 student teachers for this coming school year that we hosted last year. So as we continue to foster those relationships with the universities that we host, such as Goshen, WGU, Bethel, Ball State, Purdue, IUSB, Marion, and Grace College. At the present time, we have 8 placements already for next school year. And as we know, we're not getting a big volume of applicants. So our focus really is to foster those relationships with the student-teacher placements, because from there we're seeing that we're placing quite a bit of teachers that as they complete the program, we're hiring them on. So that is right now our primary focus, to make sure that we get them from the beginning. We went to, and by we I mean Dr. Shepard, Dr. Anderson, and I went to IUSB, and we met with about 13 students that were getting ready to graduate. Out of those 13 students, we have hired 4 or 5 already. And that is just a result of making those connections. So everyone that we come across, we also reach out to them, personal phone calls, we follow up with emails, we invite them in to look at our postings. So we learn from them that when they're placed in their student-teacher placement, oftentimes that helps or when they decide where they're teaching or what school they're interested in. So our target is to make sure we're building those relationships as soon as we post them in our school, so we can secure many more. Now, in regards to our current substitute teaching pool and our retired teachers, that's what your resources that we're looking into, because we have found that our retired teachers do like to come back and help out in those high area needs, such as exceptional learners, also in the classroom as long-term assignments. And then we also have a student teacher pool that we have our annual meeting, and that is scheduled for July 28th. And during that meeting, we also provide the professional development, as well as identify those who are looking for long-term assignments to help make sure that we have a person in place at the end of the school year while we continue our recruiting efforts and our hiring efforts. So we're able to identify that before the school year starts, where we'll be able to be placing our long-term teacher assignments as well as those retired teachers. And then in regards to outside of the box kind of thinking, I know that we have talked about recruiting in Puerto Rico. We did that for 1 year. And there were a lot of opportunities that were there that I believe we learned from. And in conversations with the Chamber of Commerce, we're looking at how we can more strategically go to Puerto Rico and do the recruiting there, simply because of the matter that we don't have to do sponsorships like we normally would be with the H-1 visa. It's a lot easier also in regards to the licensing. So that's in the works. And then also we've been looking at, it's a program called the Save More Institute, in which they do J-1 visa. And what that does is more like a teacher exchange program. So the plan is that these teachers will come from outside of the U.S., and they are experts in many content areas such as math, language arts, languages themselves, science, and then we will host them, or they will come to the district, and they would work for anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And it would just be on that rotation basis that we would work with this institution to have exchange teachers. That is an option as we're looking at different ways that we can fill those teacher vacancies. That is still in the very preliminary stages. We just started a conversation. This organization is partnered with the IDOE to help with the licensing aspect of it, to ensure that those teachers that are coming to that J-1 visa are properly licensed to be able to teach that content area. And then, of course, we continue to evaluate the need of Elevate K-12, which this was the first year that we realized that service to ensure that we had teachers in the classroom. So we're still analyzing whether or not that's something that we want to be able to move forward with. And in addition to that, one of the questions was, where are greatest needs? So based on the spreadsheet that you have, you'll notice that if we're looking at our elementary, we would have Daly Roosevelt. If we're looking at our middle school, Northside, as well as Cameron. And then, of course, we continue to have needs at the freshman divisions as well as the high school. We have started our internal transfers as well. So some of these numbers that you see are, yes, depending on the day or the time that you ask for this information, it will change. Because as you look at the work report, you'll notice there are 20 new hires. That's not all the hires, just those that we have onboarded so far. So as people resign and retire, that also changes the numbers. And so we also have transfers. So as people are transferred between buildings, once those transfers shake out, then we see against the true needs. And so that number will vary depending on where we are also as we approach the start of the school year.
Is there a cutoff for the internal transfers of when that process is done?
So we like to have that completed by the start of the school year, and then we reassess whether or not, because we want to make sure that there's stability. And last year what we did is we stopped all the internal transfers. I believe it was sometime in mid-September, October, because we wanted to make sure there was that stability. And then because we didn't have as many teachers that we were hoping to be able to have, we stopped all the internal transfers for the entire school year to maintain that consistency.
Have you talked to any of the universities and the head of the education departments or placement offices there, looking for or what their pool is of students who would be graduating in December. So if we find we have a need, that we can make those connections now with those offices and start that dialogue to see if they have potential applicants, that we can start making those connections and build that relationship with those, hoping to be able to maybe hire those in January.
We started those conversations. We have reached out to all the universities as I continue to build my department to get it adequately staffed to allow for me to do more of that. But we do have someone that is on a contracted basis to assist me with that work, that they are reaching out to the universities as well. And then, of course, we do have contact with those that oversee our student teachers, that because they're either previous employee of ours or have that relationship with Elkhart District, they're sending them our way.
Maybe I have a question. If the internal transfers don't stop until the beginning of the year, then what will be in place if like Daly and Roosevelt still have the high number? What is maybe the plan B to support them, and is there any targeted efforts to make them a priority?
Absolutely. So we have used our substitute teachers, as I mentioned. That has been one of our resources that we have in place, so that when we start this school year, we do have a staff member in place to start that as we continue the recruiting efforts. And we have talked about making more strategic for those buildings that are high need. And the conversations have been that as right now, the buildings have been very active in their interviewing and recruiting, sending the recommendations. So that has been right now the priority, that as the recommendations are coming in, offers are being made, people are being hired. So once they're at a good point, then we're going to start doing more of the strategic recruiting and hiring, that unless a specific applicant has been courted, for lack of a better word, by a principal, that's where they would go if there's a recommendation. If it is just an applicant that has applied for multiple positions, what we're doing is we're reaching out to the various principals, and that we do now, to let them know here is a great applicant. You want to go ahead and schedule the interviews, and then from there we can go ahead and make it more strategic to those tiny buildings like Daly or like Roosevelt or Marion.
You mentioned there's two visa programs. The second one, which is an extended visa program of some sort.
The J1 or the
J1?
So the J1, that is more of an exchange program, which means that we don't have to sponsor. There is no cost. Well, let me backtrack. There's very minimal cost of it. The visa itself would be paid by the person that's participating. And that is not for any intention to, as a pathway for citizenship or permanent residency. It's solely for the experience. So it's treated as an exchange. So it would be rather than an exchange student, it would be an exchange teacher.
But that's for multiple years, though.
That would be anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Now,
And how about these people that would have families? Or is this only for single?
No. So as we've been working with this organization to figure out what is the best course of action and how we can partner up, they actually work with people that are, some of them have their spouses that are also credentialed to teach. So they bring their families with them, in which either now the J1 visa is strictly just for teaching. So we have to have at least one of the family members that will be holding a teaching assignment. Definitely, there have been occasions where both of them are teachers. But when it's only one teacher and the other staff member or the other household member, they work in our support staff position. We've had, based on the information that we got from this organization, care professionals, bus helpers, bus drivers, food service, because the whole family is coming, and then their students or children attend the school.
And how many people in that category would we have, that particular kind of visa? Here at Elkhart already?
Right now, none. So this is a program that we're just starting to look into, because it doesn't require us to sponsor somebody. The organization that we would be working with, they were currently vetting, would do all the pre-screening, and they would make sure that they are properly vetted to be able to do that.
Okay, and so do they get help with housing and such from their organization?
Excellent question. We have the same thing. So what they ask of the district is that we have, let's say, a coordinator, someone that would welcome the individual, help them get acclimated, but the individual themselves will be responsible for their housing, their transportation, food and shelter. And the individuals that normally participate in these programs, based on what we are informed, have the means to be able to do that.
Okay, so they're bringing resources with them.
Yes, we will not need to provide any reallocation allowance or things of that nature.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Of the vacancies in the elementary buildings, roughly 50% appear to be in the 5th or 6th grade. Do you have a reason for that trend or an understanding of why we have so many vacancies in the 5th and 6th grade?
So with vacancies in the elementary, sometimes they're hard to track because as a building administrator, you have the discretion to move your staff around depending on how you would like to put your team together. And some of these vacancies are not a result of somebody resigning or retiring from that grade level. It's just as a result of also within the building being moved to a different grade level. So unless I can hone in into a specific vacancy or a person, I would be able to tell you if it as a result of a transfer from the building or as a result of somebody resigning. So these are a combination of very many different factors.
So it's not a trend, it's just an unusually high percentage right now on this report?
Yes. Any other questions I can assist with?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. On to new business.
For the first item, the administrative team and I would recommend that the board approve SiteLogic as the vendor for the district demographic and feasibility study in the amount of $93,750.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Several items in terms of board policy tonight. The first item is brought to you for initial consideration, which are proposed revisions to the bylaws of the board related to public participation. As you may be aware of, the Indiana General Assembly made a number of changes to public participation at school board meetings. One of those was to require an opportunity for members of the public to comment on agenda items. Now, historically, that's been done as the board members have been voting on particular items. What we are recommending is that prior to the commencement of the meeting, of the formal business items, there would be an opportunity on the agenda for members of the public to comment on a particular agenda item. So that would be one of the proposed changes to the policy, which would be to allow for that, which by state law will need to do that. And the other would be to continue the public comment section at the end of the board meeting. The recommendation would be to limit public comments at the end of the board meeting to 30 minutes. I would say 99% of the time that's more than ample time in terms of that particular issue. But that is something that the board president could, based upon their discretion, extend that period of time. I would also note that one of the changes to state law, as I've talked about this with Indiana's Public Access Counselor, is actually an expectation that we provide the public comment during work sessions as well. And so the policy makes some changes in that particular area. We're bringing it to this tonight for just initial consideration. Our intention is to have this bylaw presented in final form on June 28th, as the changes must be in place as soon as state law by July 1. Any comments or questions or suggestions related to the proposed bylaw change?
Okay, so, so when it says every regular in-person meeting, that includes work sessions?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need to spell that out?
I think
would it be more clear?
We could certainly be more clear to specifically indicate including work sessions, but I think that work sessions are obviously public sessions. So
right, I just think because we've always referred to the board meeting is the regular meeting, and then the other one is the public work session, so.
They are both regularly scheduled, but certainly there's no problem, there would be no problem with adding that language to the policy to make it clear, actually the bylaw to make it clear that there is an opportunity for public comment during the work session as well.
Okay.
Probably that would make sense for that public comment period to focus on the topics of the work session.
Right.
So that's one change that sort of we can make, and that's the reason why I want to bring this to you now, so we have some time to think about changes we might want to have.
And then, under the section when you're talking about, at the end of the meeting, when we do public comment, limiting it to not to exceed 30 minutes. I know you said that, that's to the discretion. Do we even need that in there?
I thought about that, but again, I want to kind of leave that to the discretion of the board as to whether or not you want to add that specific language in there that says that the board president would have the discretion to expand that beyond that.
I know 9 times out of 10, because that's 10 people. Now, rarely do we have 10 people, but there are times when we may. So I don't want this to be,
I wouldn't see a problem at all with making that change.
Well, what's the proposed change?
Proposed change would be to provide the board president with the opportunity to expand the time period for public comment beyond the 30 minutes.
doesn't matter. I just don't want to have something
As I've
where.
talked with attorneys around the state about that is not uncommon to look at adding language like that in there that would allow for that opportunity to expand that period of time.
You have to have a time limit?
You do not have to have a specific time limit. That's another option, is to take that out.
Because we're certainly not going to be like, oh, it's 30 minutes and there were 3 more people that need to do it.
Exactly.
And then that would look terrible on our part, so.
And that's why,
But if it's in there and, people could say, well, the policy says 30 minutes, so.
And I think that's why it would be important to add the language in there that gives the board president the discretion to expand the period of time for public comment.
Yeah, I think that's important, because if people are taking the time to come, we need to take the time to turn around.
A couple of other changes that we made. One of the changes that I elected to make was, while our form still asks for people to give their address, I know during a number of the meetings that we've had over the last year, people have expressed concern about sharing their address during a public meeting, especially given today's day and age where we broadcast over Facebook. So I have recommended that we remove that language in terms of that. We still ask for that information on the form. We can submit that.
But that's more record keeping.
That's more from record keeping standpoint than anything. And then some other minor changes in addition to that. One of the changes that you'll look at, the proposed changes, is we do digital audio or video recordings and then delete the word tape recordings. I think with the exception of my tape recording expulsion conferences, most people have moved long beyond videotape and audio tape and are recording digitally. So we thought we'd think that language there.
Quick question on that. Is there anything in this that if they do not notify the superintendent's office prior to the meeting?
What I have done in terms of the language is encourage people to notify the superintendent's office prior to the board meeting. That language was originally written, I think, to address the media who would come with huge video equipment. But I think we certainly want people to at least notify the superintendent's office ahead of time, primarily from the standpoint of making sure that folks also understand we don't want to have somebody, and I think of going to college graduations where a family member is standing with their iPad holding up like this and blocking the view for 20 people that are sitting behind them. So I think it's more to have that dialogue about not having an obstruction between the board and the audience. Not being in a situation where somebody is actually conducting an interview during a meeting. And so that's why I think it's important to continue to have that language, and it kind of sets forth the expectations of what we want somebody to do who is recording that board meeting.
Would it be possible to set a table up in front of our own camera and they can set their recording device up there.
That would certainly be an option, yeah. There are other suggestions that you have, prior to me bringing this back, the 28th, the ones that we talked about, but happy to hear from you. Moving on, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we've been meeting, regularly with bus drivers and bus helpers to really talk, with them about some, changes that, need to take place in terms of, compensation for both of those two employee groups. And so this evening, we are recommending changes to the bus driver compensation plan, that were developed and discussed during those meetings that we have had with the drivers committee. We're also asking for waive second reading so that these changes take effect on July 1st. The first change for the drivers would be to increase the rate for driving bus routes by $1.80 an hour. And we are also proposing to increase extra trip rate from $14.50 an hour to $18 per hour. We didn't come up with these rates without a lot of consultation with Mr. Scott, so he is more than comfortable with the fact that we can afford that from a budgetary standpoint. But we believe that it's important for us to retain competitiveness with other school districts. And so in addition to that, we are proposing to change the language about how we place drivers on the pay scale. So for example, if you've been driving a school bus for Wanee Community Schools for the last 20 years, and you choose to come to Elkhart, we're not going to start you at the beginning year rate. We're going to recognize your years of service to Wanee as we hire you. And I think that will give us the opportunity maybe to attract some drivers to come to our community schools from some of our surrounding districts. I think as we all know, there isn't a district you can drive by pretty much in the United States that is looking for bus drivers. So if we can do something to make our district more attractive to drivers, we want to do that.
It's amazing we didn't already have that, because why would anybody come here given that sort of tenure, to come here?
So because it's a great district to drive for. When you think about the distances some of our drivers drive and the routes that we have, there's some competitiveness there.
Sure.
We have many drivers that are driving 6 hours or more a day. We're really reaching the point where there's full-time employment as a driver. You can't say that for a district the size, for example, College.
Right. Okay.
So that's so again, we're actually waiting seconds of reading with that. So we put these things in place.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
This is drivers only, not helpers.
That's next.
Gotcha, thank you.
No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Mr. Scott must have read my mind that the next item on the agenda was changes to compensation for bus helpers. And we're proposing a similar $1.80 per hour change for our bus helpers. And again, we're asking the board to waive second reading for that. In addition, we are adding into the bus helper language specifically related to retention payments. We have paid those to bus helpers under board resolutions that have been passed on prior occasions, and we would like to put that into the policy itself. So we're going to keep back for that. And in both areas, what we intend to do, and we continue to do over the next months and years, is really work with both our drivers and our helpers to make Elkhart Community Schools Transportation Department the employer of choice for school transportation paraprofessionals, whether that be drivers, whether that be helpers, whether that be mechanics. That people are looking to come here first. So again, we're asking you to raise second reading as to changes to the bus helper compensation plan.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there any discussion?
Just to be clear on the retention, it's $250 per semester for a helper who works more than 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add that maybe we could do something down the road. I've been hearing from several of the principals that they would like to have an opportunity for the bus drivers and helpers to meet the students like at a roundup or, that kind of thing, but we would probably have to pay them for that day or time, because it personalizes the experience of knowing your bus driver, that actually personalizes the experience for the bus driver to actually get to know the child and the family. So, sometime down the road, I'd like to make sure that could be.
I will pass that information on to John.
Love that. I love
I think
that.
it's a great idea. As we've said many times in the past, our drivers frequently know families better than anybody else. I think we even talked about that earlier this evening in terms of the fact that they'll know that student for their entire career with the district.
They're the first and last ones with our babies.
That's right.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Lastly, again, bringing for initial consideration proposed revisions to Board Policy 5460.01 regarding commencement exercises. We're proposing the addition of language related to the demonstration of employability skills for requirements for graduates to participate in commencement exercises. And as I was drafting up my comments for this evening, I thought to myself, one of our board members is going to say to me, Mr. Ford, what are employability skills? So
The governor's task.
I panicked and did two things. One, I sent a text message immediately to Carrie Anderson and asked Carrie to give me a list of things. And when I wasn't sure I was going to hear from Carrie, I went on the IDOE website and printed out what the graduation pathway employability skills are. So I've got copies of those for you to take a look at. And I bet you the superintendent's already read them. And I've even got a couple of X's to share with the audience. But Carrie also pointed out to me that other examples might include participation in internships, earning the governor's work ethic certification, pride grades, records of good attendance, participation in clubs and activities. And I love it when things fit together. When I hear Dan talking about students participating in supporting the summer STEM camp. I say that 3 times fast. That's an example of those employability skills, along with a lot of the other things that people have talked about this evening. Again, this is just being brought to you tonight for additional consideration. And if there are suggestions or comments the board members might have related to this proposed policy change, I'd love to hear that.
Specifically, this is the 3 buckets that we always refer to for graduation. So the first part about credits is the credits that you need to complete for the core 40. The employability skills would be the things related to active involvement in an extracurricular or having a job or doing a work-based learning experience. And then the third one is the post-secondary competency. That's passing SAT, ACT, ASVAB, earning dual credits, IB if you're an international baccalaureate school, all those kind of things. So this specifically switches to the 3 graduation buckets that are now the graduation requirements for the class of 2023.
That's what the governor is calling the GPS graduate prepares to succeed. Isn't that what they've been rolling out their dashboard that they're going to be rolling out this fall?
It would be a reference to your overall graduation rate, and then you can, as a district, choose which of those things you might want to highlight. So out of those requirements, you might highlight post-secondary credits the kids are taking with them, or certifications.
It's kind of like when I was on the IDOE site, the whole revamping of the dashboard and all this stuff, and that's in place as far as the academic piece, this piece, and the other pieces. They're different categories that they're kind of
giving you the option to highlight.
But they're revamping everything, how the data that they're going to be sharing, how they're going to what kind of data they're going to use to evaluate some of the areas
From a meeting I attended on this, they were talking about specifically there'll be some things that are non-negotiable that all districts will have, and then you'll have the option yourself to highlight certain things that you would want to highlight.
So is this like, say you have somebody that is like beyond credit recovery, you utilize these as an opportunity to?
You still have the requirement to obtain your 40 credit hours.
Okay.
So you still have to get the number of credit hours, and that's bucket one. And then the other two buckets are that you demonstrate employability by either being really involved in an extracurricular activity beyond just participation, but like you might help with set design for the musical, or you help co-direct, or you're a student director, or you help develop and run plays and train other players in a sport. So you're doing more than just being on the roster. Or you do something involved with employment, work-based learning, apprenticeship, internship, those kind of things. So that's the second bucket. And then the third bucket is the post-secondary readiness. And that's typically a test, honors diploma, or earning post-secondary credit.
Okay, yeah.
Does this mean if I have to score 40, but not these other two, I'm not going to graduate?
That is correct.
And how likely is it that somebody's 2 credit hours short of the core 40, but has completed a post-secondary competency requirement?
It could be. And they would do credit recovery in the summer, and then they technically have until the end of that summer, technically October 1st, to get those credits and complete all 3 buckets to be considered a graduate of the class of 23.
Remember, this just focuses on.
Yeah, I'm just in my mind, I'm thinking.
Beyond that, we have the entire graduation requirements, which get into all of these particular issues.
Just in my mind is like if somebody has an honors degree, yet they're only 38 hours of their core competency. It doesn't seem like that would ever happen.
And chances are, if you have an honors diploma, you wouldn't be eligible for an honors diploma because you can't have a grade lower than a C. To get an honors diploma, and so to be behind on credits somewhere along the line, you must have gotten a lower grade.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about the kids who are not scholars, that kind of struggle. Who is helping them keep up with these other 2 areas?
The counselors within the building at each one of those schools of study, helping them develop their 4-year plans that then carry into what they'll do within the school of study. And then that's tracked.
I think if you think back to the lack of better word, war room in the high school has had in place, where they're specifically focused on, here are the students who we need to make sure that we're paying attention to get them over the bar. That's what we'll be continuing to do within each one of the schools of study, within School Without Walls, within the academy, and all of those to make sure that we are getting the students over the bar. The intention here is to also make it clear that if you want to walk, you need to do this. And that's also an incentive to get that student to understand the importance of this, because they do want to walk. And to the question that Mr. Scott raised, we do have a number of students who walk with less than those 2 credit hours, missing those 2 credit hours, and a large number of those students recover those over the summer or with School Without Walls. We do a lot of work to make sure that those students actually do graduate with that diploma, with that process.
Speaking to Krista Honey about this, who's the principal of School Without Walls, she really wants to emphasize, because she does get these students, right? And so she really wants to emphasize that the students and parents understand this right, as soon as possible in the freshman year, that there needs to be something that's specific that is explaining this, and that the counselors are really explaining to the students that if they get one of these credits, like let's say in their freshman year, because sometimes there's coaching changes and other things, it'll be up to them to get those forms signed by that coach then, in that freshman year. So they don't end up in their senior year going, oh, but I did this, and then they can't, then maybe that coach has moved on and it's more difficult. So she was really emphasizing either the need to have the counselors.
Or awareness.
Correct, yeah, and it really needs to be emphasized because it is a change, and the other change is some of this is being required to be in person, and it can't be done virtually.
I was going to add,
for social workers. they can't, or counselors to keep up with.
It's a lot, so.
It's gonna take a team to make
Yes.
this happen.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure, because our communication piece sometimes, we assume that people know things, and I think in this particular thing, we don't want anybody to be surprised, because that, at the end of their, having this great experience with Elkhart Community Schools, and then to say, what? So let's make sure that our communication on this is almost over the top.
Which is precisely why Mr. Anderson and the staff of the high school thought it was imperative that we get this before the board as quickly as possible. So
Yes.
in the community.
Agreed.
What were you doing?
I was going to add that one of the employability pieces too, or the post-secondary pieces, is completing a career tech pathway. So if someone is going through the vocational school and completing a career tech pathway, that completes that bucket. And often those end in a work-based experience or a capstone project or placement, or those students will have a part-time job. So even for a student who might be less academically inclined, if they're passing their classes, they're doing a CCE pathway, looking to go right into the world of work, and they've got a part-time job where they do that capstone project or work-based learning, that gets them there. And that's how we're actually getting many kids to graduate currently that wouldn't have fallen under the old system of passing the I-Learn and getting there that way. So we've been employing the bucket system for the past few years to get kids to graduation because of that particular option within the pathway.
The other thing I would note is the collaboration that's taking place between the high school and the career center now is phenomenal. And I just spent a good deal of time, which the lawyer spends so much time with Brandon and Carrie Anderson and Dale Draper talking specifically about these things and what we need to do to make sure that we have programs that are going to grab a hold of and serve the needs of all of the kids in Elkhart High School.
Thank you.
I just hung out at the meeting. They were
Well, but you just sister them and that's important.
So, if there are any other changes or suggestions, please don't hesitate to make those changes, and we will have this back on the agenda in 2 weeks. Hopefully for your approval.
Thank you.
Now, the high point of the meeting.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So this is Nicole Sheets, our bid and commodities coordinator, and has been working diligently since the beginning of March to get our bids ready for tonight. So I'm going to read the bid and then we'll both be here for any questions. So the business office is recommending board approval for all food services from August 1st, 2022 through July 28th, 2023 to the following companies: Gordon's Food Service, Ian's Food Service, Commercial Food, Piazza Produce, Walrus Packaging, Dagwell, Alpha Creamery Bakers, and Eaton's Food, in the amount of $4,267,357.76.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, when I first was reviewing the packet, I saw the bids, and I'm like, I don't understand this. I was going through it, and then I saw the spreadsheet. So thank you for adding that, but I just want to say, what a thorough process, doing a spreadsheet, all the vendors, comparing the bids, comparing the needs. You guys did a great job. But I will say, I kind of panicked when I first looked at it, going, how did they come up with this? And then your work was duly presented, so thank you for the hard work on this. It was, sure, it's a monumental task. So
of the same size and quantity as last year?
It's about 200,000 more than last year. And Ian and I talked about this the other day. There's two things that are kind of going on with that. One is, yes, we have increases in supply, plastic, pork is the other thing that if you look at our whole pork, double, or the pork tender. So also we're taking multiple bids. Some of the bidders are putting market price. Well, we want to make sure once it goes past the market price that we have another bid that we can get.
How about dealing with shortages? Because I remember a couple of years ago we got into a problem. We stubbed our toe with Troyer, I think it was.
Correct.
And I'm just looking at the economy in general. Do you see any problems with the shortages from any of these suppliers?
Yeah, I mean, we've been dealing with this for 2 years, pretty much once COVID happened.
Right.
This year actually looks like it may be the worst going into it. We're talking with vendors and brokers, just due to the fuel prices and going crazy and just getting again, everybody needs employees. Everybody, so we are going to be looking at possibly having to do changes throughout the week. But we've been doing that, and we set up a program that any parent can go online at any time, and here's your base calendar, or your menu for the month, but there's a subtitle that you can go into and notice that, hey, I can get basket sticks, and then we're doing spaghetti pizzas, so they can be informed.
Thank you.
May not take wise.
Nicole usually comes to my office every time we're ordering to let me know what we can get, what we can substitute it with.
One of the things I want to bring up too, now, for this coming school year, as of right now, the federal government isn't going to be paying for lunches, right? We're going to be going back on the free and reduced lunch schedule, so families will have to pay as of right now. Do we have any idea of when that might? I mean, I'm sure that the government's going to wait till the last minute, I'm guessing.
All the waivers end on June 30th.
On June 30th. So as of July 1, as of right now, as of July 1, just so families can plan and understand that as of right now, that there will be costs for families for meals, right? And we don't know what those are yet until we approve all this, so you guys can go figure that out. Right. Okay. Okay.
Is there any other discussion?
I just want to make one other comment, because when I was reading through this, and Pam and I talked about it yesterday, I was confused because the dairy shows firm and escalating and de-escalating, but nobody else did, and so we had a conversation about that, and these are firm. The other ones are listed, so anything listed there, even though it doesn't say firm, it's a firm price.
It does say firm on documents that we send out to the vendors. And of course, we all know that in our market right now, firm doesn't mean anything. So, what we do is ask that the vendors give us 30 days to be able to go out and find something.
Okay, so we've got that built in. Okay.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Shepherd, you're up next.
Lots of work. Thank you.
Christine, we were talking about graduation pathways because that's what I'm here to talk to you about as well.
A simplified explanation of the course structure under the CTA graduation pathways is that the 6 credits of content in a specific pathway now are being divided into 3 separate courses that are 2 credits each. First course, the foundational course in that pathway is called Principles course. The next course is called Concentrator A. The third course is called Concentrator B. Those courses lead either to dual enrollment courses or some embedded work-based learning experience for students. So the courses that the administration is sharing with you this evening are new courses that are the beginnings of our programs of study in our schools of study, not in the Career Center. First one is Computer Science 3 Cybersecurity. This is actually Concentrator B course, so it will round out 3 courses for computer science. The next course, Principles of Fashion and Textiles, will be the foundation course for pathway of fashion textile. And that will be offered through the School of Human Services. I guess I should have mentioned first cybersecurity course is offered through the School of ETI. Textiles, apparel, and merchandising is the Concentrator A course for the fashion and textile pathway. Then we move down to the Principles of Early Childhood. This would be a different pathway, also though in the School of Human Services. The Principles of Early Childhood Education is the foundation course, and Early Childhood Education Curriculum is the Concentrator A course. A third pathway in the School of Human Services is called All Things Human Services. Principles of Human Services, as in your packet, serve as the foundational course for that one. And then a fourth pathway in the School of Human Services will be the Culinary and Hospitality pathway. Principles of Culinary and Hospitality will be the foundation course, as you have read about that. Other courses to round out the pathways will be added later as the need rises and as they are being developed, as the curriculum is written and the standards are being unwrapped and determined what has to be taught in those classes. There are some really good advantages to going down this pathway. It does provide an opportunity for students who otherwise would not be able to complete the requirements in that bucket number 3, as Dr. Thalheimer mentioned to you a little bit earlier. There will be some students who will not meet those minimum requirements under an SAT score, for example, or one of the other ways in which students could reach box 3 by taking courses such as these courses, the principles courses, the 2 concentrator courses, and then the capstone experience after that. Then, like Dr. Thalheimer said, we have a lot of students who are going to be able to cross that line successfully. So that's why these courses have been added. And we're actually looking forward to that culinary one. It's kind of exciting to me. I think I'm going to have to go supervise that when she does on the basic cooking especially. Do you have any questions?
I do, or maybe more of a comment, maybe kind of both. As I'm reading through these, and I know we've been adding more and more classes every few months, and it's confusing. So I'm thinking as a parent and even as a student, do we have anything in a document that breaks down, even on the website, that breaks down, okay, this is the Human Services School, these are the different pathways that are under it, and these are the courses that are under it, and do that for each school so that parents and students have an idea of what's going on. There's so many things within each school of study that it's confusing.
I'll have to see where that migrated over with the new rollout of the website.
Because
But
I
there
know-
were color-coded sheets
Yes.
of like what's in there and then the potential pathways within that school of study.
Okay,
So,
because I know there was a description of like ideas of careers and avenues for each school of study, but not necessarily the pathways, and what that looks like.
yeah, let me make a note and
Okay.
see where that is and, yeah.
I know there's just a lot going on.
That's a great marketing.
Absolutely.
Marketing, if our pathways are broken down and all the classes are there, it might, you know,
And
encourage
then
more
we
people
could like
to.
put a star or something that shows what are in that pathway.
Right, because I was,
Or even just have underneath that pathway what all the courses are.
Well, there will be many other courses in that school study that.
right, well, because I was looking at like the human services, I'm like, okay, well, we've got early childhood education, we've got fashion and textiles, what else, or what is all that encompassing, because it's broad.
This is the second discussion I've had on cybersecurity education this week. I see we have one teacher that has gone through training for that. I think it's a very hot topic. I think probably a number of students are very interested in it. Has any other teachers indicated that they would be willing to go through training for staff?
Rick Silver is actually working on that, recruiting on that. We also have applied for a grant that would help us get others training, and not just at high school level, but actually science down a little further and build up.
Sure. Yeah, that's.
And that would also cover to have some training to do that early in school. Even our dream is to start in elementary.
That was my anticipation. So this is right now for grades 11 and 12.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions or discussion for Dr. Shepherd? Okay, thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Shepherd. Or is there anything from the audience? Thank you. Nancy?
My name is Nancy Baker. I reside at Pleasant Plains here in Elkhart. I'm a fifth grade teacher. I did not come here this evening planning to speak, but I felt like I had to say something after the earlier discussion on public works session. I just want to affirm Mr. England and Dr. Chalmers for what they said about the empathy. They said it much better than I could. I wasn't consulted about the change in empathy. In fact, I didn't hear about it till I happened to be at a 3-hour PTO meeting this afternoon. Hours I was not paid for it. But I digress. And I heard about it that there was, because the prize banners had been destroyed in the renovation of our school, and they're going to have to be replaced. So I heard that was a change. And I wasn't consulted, but to be honest, I don't feel offended by that at all. I don't have to be consulted with everything. So you can see I often like to be present in things. I guess I would just like to say that placing empathy into pride does not demote academics, not at all. But it does do, I think, it raises it up. It puts a spotlight on it. It's something that's for both teachers and students, and I think it's needed. I was actually very glad when I heard that empathy was going to be the replacement. I think that empathy is part of a foundation for the culture that I really think I have to establish in my classroom. I have to do it starting at the beginning of the year. It's needed. And if I don't do that, if I don't establish that empathy and that respect, my students don't feel that from me, if they don't feel it for each other, I can't help every child to achieve to the highest of their ability.
Jesse?
Hello. I was just hoping that for our parent advisory meeting, we could get something scheduled and locked in, like how this board meeting is every 2 weeks. The leading and then waiting for a reply for somebody to get to us is getting, I just want something concrete that people know and expect is going to happen every, I would like 2 weeks, I don't know, whatever, I would like 2 weeks. And then I know that Frida has been working with me a lot on these events, and if she's leaving the district, I'd like to know who I should count on being in contact with for those.
We've had conversations about both of those
Okay.
issues, so there's information coming out, and we'll do that. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Thank you. Joby?
Okay. Well, I wasn't planning on being, well, hold on. The figure, I love you, I'll miss you next year. I wasn't planning on being here tonight, but it's been a while, so I thought I'd show up for support. I didn't plan on speaking tonight, but here I am. I might not have been here for a while, but I've been participating virtually and trying to get my autistic son ABA services before school starts, and I'm running out of time before the school year starts. And I'm fearful of what going into kindergarten for him is going to look like since he hasn't had any redirection. I know I'm not the only parent who feels exhausted and at the end of the rope. It's highly exhausting to keep fighting, but I literally cannot stress it enough. We need to change going into the next school year, and we need to stick to it. I'm proud to see the recent events that have been hosted, and I'm hopeful it steps in the right direction. We cannot lose our focus just because our kids are on summer break. This is time to make the change and implement it before school starts. The bottom line is more accountability for the bullies and make a safe environment for our children, so parents like myself don't have to fight with sending our kids to school because they don't feel safe or protected, and to keep the events coming from the school district to go beyond just showing that there's talk happening, but the action to also back it up is what we want to see. In reference to the bullying, I reached out to 5 other local school districts over the school year of last year and started the transfer process multiple times throughout the school year, but every time I got a call from the secretary at Mary Daly, I told her to throw the transfer referral away, giving the benefit of the doubt. Why? Because I know, and I've spoken to some amazing staff and amazing teachers. Some of these amazing teachers have had the pleasure of teaching my children, so not all apples are bad, but the bad ones need to be respectfully tossed out or be retrained. Plus, I know that bullying is the same situation in every school district I contacted. Shouldn't we strive to do and be better than the surrounding schools, knowing it's an issue in all of Elkhart County and its surrounding areas?
Brittany?
I'm glad I'm not the only one that felt compelled to speak tonight after the change in the Pride thing. Piggybacking off of what Beth said, teaching children to accept and be accepting and have empathy for others, I mean, it can really cut back on bullying and can really, help them to focus on their academics. I'm a behavioral therapist. What I do for a living is I shape behavior. I work with special needs kids, and at my job specifically, we have programs dedicated to bringing kids in that are not on the spectrum, and we teach them to interact with kids that are on the spectrum, and vice versa. So these kids that are on the spectrum learn to interact with kids that are not on the spectrum. And, I think that right there teaches a lot of empathy. And I think that's something that should be taught in schools in general. I have a lot of kids at my center specifically that are going to be going to school in the fall. And, like Shelby and her fear for her son going in kindergarten this fall, I have fears for my kids that are leaving my center and what school is going to look like for them. Because of bullying and because of how they get treated. Because not everybody knows how to
interact with peers that are on the spectrum and interact with kids that are different than them. I mean, I'm an adult and I look a different way than other people and I get treated differently as an adult. So when you place kids that are different in a school where they, you know, where kids don't know how to interact with people that are different than them, it takes a toll on them. I think while we can agree that there should have been a little bit more discussion, I think we can also agree that empathy is important and needs to be taught. I think this is a perfect example of that, and I think this should be a lesson for everyone. Thank you.
Dr. Carter, do you have anything?
Just at your places, I had received an email on Friday from a developer who was looking for a letter of support for a development that's coming in, and they're submitting an application at the end of July. So I emailed back and just said, what have been letters like this done before? What are you looking for? And so on the back of the email that I printed out at your place, there's a sample letter that had come from another school district when they've done this before. So I'm just interested in if this is something the board would support me sending a letter on, if there are reservations about doing something like this. I just wanted to provide this for you and would welcome feedback on whether the consensus of the board would be to support that with a letter like that. Knowing the difficulty for housing within the city, and this is a kind of a block from the police station to the southeast a little bit, just on the other side of the Marion Street parking garage, back behind Hotel Elkhart. So I just know that anything we could do to increase the amount of housing that's available, whether for families or for potential employees, I don't know would be a bad thing. So I just would want your input on that. And then secondly, I have notification that the State Board of Ed has received our 1003 waiver, and that will be considered at the July 13th board meeting. Something that we've talked about too is that Elkhart Schools is part of a consortium of schools that have been given some exemption power, and in talking with some of the founding schools in that group that we have been joined with, we think there's a possibility that if I don't get the waiver through this process, I'd be able to do it through the other. So just saying that I'm exploring those options to look at what we can do and that we should be able to accomplish that. So.
I get a question about this letter. When it mentions tax credits, what impact does that have on our school corporation?
I don't know if I can ask them that question.
Because I know that accounting on a regular basis issues tax abatements, which has a huge impact, I think, on this. And I think pretty much we routinely criticize the county for doing so, to make sure that we're not.
Yeah. Is it like a landlord? Like, what is it? Like, is he looking to build houses? Is he looking to turn houses into more apartments? Because you're talking about that, like, little area that's behind the, you know, police station to Prairie Street. Those are all houses that are already over there. So
it's saying where the current wheelchair help building is located. So there's a building there.
They want to turn it into apartments?
Or tear it down and put up a building. That's all I have.
Anything from the board? Meeting adjourned.
Look, we can't smile and laugh. I am not